Chapter 2599. A Fight Between Father and Son. 4. Was the man responsible for the fate of all the continents? Was he the master of heavenly law? Di Fui's fingers were tapping on the table as he began to think through the obvious clues and gradually approach the truth. Just as this thought entered his mind, thunder could be heard in the sky, as if a heavenly secret had been exposed. Then he laughed. Gu Shijio stood at the door to check on Di Hao, only to find him stretching his small arms and legs. She occasionally turned her head to observe Di Fui and noticed that he was laughing at himself. So she asked him, "What are you laughing at?" Di Fui stood up and walked over to her. He then grabbed her waist and hugged her in his arms. "I was laughing because I realized that lifting rocks and dropping them on my own feet was actually quite painful." Gu Shijio expressed to him that she did not understand what he meant. Unfortunately, Di Fui no longer explained himself. Instead, he asked her, "When should we leave?" Gu Shijio asked him in return, "What is the progress of your recovery?" "I'm almost done. I will not have a problem dismantling those starry arrays." "Okay, let's go now then." "Unfortunately, I have a low level of skill right now and can't help you. Otherwise, I could dismantle a few of them on my own," Gu Shijio said regretfully. Although Di Fui's skills were almost fully restored, her power remained stagnant and did not improve at all. She had no clue when she would return to her usual self. "If everything goes according to plan, I believe your spiritual power will return to you once the Shura world is restored back to normal." Gu Zijia's eyes lit up as she heard the good news from Di Fui. "What are we waiting for then? Let's go. Let's quickly dismantle the starry arrays." "I will go too." Di Hao jumped over and reached out to grab Gu Zijia's sleeve. Di Fui rolled up his sleeve and pulled him over. "Bad boy, don't trouble your mother." Naturally, they would bring him along since they came back to get him. Di Hao struggled out from his arms and said, "I want to bring little Xie." "Little Xie?" Di Hao raised his hand and whistled loudly. After a while, there was a white shadow that appeared in the distance. Soon, a silver-white beast appeared in the yard. The animal was as big as a cow, while its posture was somewhat similar to a unicorn. Its eyes were as bright as the stars, and it looked mighty and strong. Xieji. It was the creature that Gu Shijio once mistakenly thought was a silver wolf. She did not expect it to grow so big in such a short time. It was very affectionate when it walked around Gu Shijio, with its head and tail swaying uncontrollably. Gu Shijio patted it on its back and said, "Xiaoxia, you have grown so big. That's quite impressive. You can now carry your little master. In fact, if you can grow any bigger, you can even carry all three of us." Xie immediately raised its head and let out a sound that sounded very much like a whistle. Its body seemed to be momentarily covered by a white light all of a sudden, and when the light dispersed, its stature had grown by almost twofold. It was now the size of an elephant. This creature could actually change its size at will. Great! Since Xie had sincerely invited them all on its back, Di Fui and Gu Shijio did not reject it. The family of three rode on the back of Xie and headed out of the devil world toward the city. Whenever they reached a city, they would be welcomed by the people. The city owners did not even dare to say anything to them. They would obediently lead Di Fui and his son into the cave with the starry array so that they could reconfigure the array and help the grievances to rest in peace. Only Di Fui and Di Hao would enter the caves. Gu Shijio would not go in. It was because Di Fui said that there was too much resentment in the starry arrays and it was not good for her baby, so he asked her to wait outside. As for Di Hao, Di Fui treated this kid as a man. A man must be trained since young. Moreover, he also wanted to indirectly prove to Gu Shijio that he did treat Di Hao like his own son. At the very least, he would have taught him the secret of breaking the starry array. Chapter 2600. Pick up the soft persimmon and pinch him. Di Hao was unhappy. He was still a baby, after all. Therefore, he really felt that Di Fui was pushing him to the limits. In the starry array, those evil spirits were extremely fierce, especially when they saw this little young boy who looked like fresh meat. They screamed and rushed over to bite his flesh and drink his blood. This certainly made it a frightening experience for the young toddler. Although his father was always at the forefront, those grievances were clearly afraid of his temperament, so they did not bother him. In fact, they would keep a safe distance from him at all times. Nonetheless, once he passed them, they became aggressive again. Such a soft little boy. It must be delicious to eat. The grievances were getting closer and closer to him as they spoke. His exposed skin is as fair as white jade. Is his body also this fair? There is a wretched grievance that attempted to tear his little robe. He is so small. I really want to swallow him. There was a grievance with a big mouth that was evidently approaching him. Father! Father! Dihao shouted while he was busy handling the grievances that disturbed him, hoping his father would turn around and save him. Follow me. Difui did not turn back, but continued to move forward. Dihao felt dismayed by the response he received. Was it really good for such a little baby to deal with these grievances alone? His legs were so short, and there were so many disturbances along the way. How could he keep up? Ha ha! Little doll, nobody cares about you. Little doll, let me eat you in my mouth. You look like glutinous rice buns. You must be very sweet. This little doll is really handsome. His little face is so bouncy. The grievances grew even more arrogant over time. Many white, scary arms stretched out toward Dihao in an attempt to seize him. It was like a ghost jungle, with hands lunged at him from all directions, wanting to tear him into pieces. To make matters worse, there was a grievance that actually pulled his pants and tried to strip him of his clothes. Dihao was furious. Bully the young kid, picked up the soft persimmon and pinch him. The grievances continued to disturb the young boy. But did they really think it was so convenient to mess with him? All of a sudden, Dihao stopped walking. His small fingers were pinched together as he cast a difficult spell. A long silver sword appeared instantly in his palm. He swung it and managed to chop off the arms of the evil spirits that bothered him, just like cutting cabbage. The grievances naturally did not expect such a little kid that seemed harmless to have such a powerful skill. Fortunately for them, although their arms were cut off, they could be restored in an instant. Being furious at the kid, they now decided to attack him collectively. Many shadows came from all directions and rushed towards Dihao. These grievances have been shackled here for a long time, so their resentments were deep. Naturally, none of them were easy to deal with. Additionally, the array here was suitable for their growth. Each of them had spiritual power that was equivalent to that of a golden immortal. Due to their increased ferociousness, the temperature seemed to have dropped by a few degrees in the star formation. The dark space was now filled with terrifying ghostly howlings. Difui, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped. His fingers that were always inside his sleeves quickly pinched a spell. Nonetheless, he seemed to have sensed something, and his fingers slowly loosened. Behind him, he noticed that little Dihao had a faint white light bursting out of his sleeves that seemed to surround the evil spirits that had attacked him. In an instant, the evil spirits seemed to turn into smoke once the white light covered them. In the distance, the other evil spirits that were preparing to join the battle to bully the kid became stunned. They finally understood that this little doll was a mighty baby. None of them dared to provoke him further. Chapter 26:01. Why did no one teach you? Dihao flicked his sleeves all over to get rid of the dust that he inadvertently touched. When he looked up, he saw that Difui was looking at him from nearby. The man was clearly in deep thought about something. Dihao strolled over to him. Father, Difui smiled. Your skill is not bad. Then he added, it does not look like something me or your mother would have taught you. Dihao bit a small mouth. Of course, I learned it without a teacher. Difui's heart sank. What must have happened in the future that he and Gu Shijio did not teach their kid martial arts? Difui bent over and picked him up, and then strode forward. Why did no one teach you? Did you lose your parents? Were you kidnapped? Having Difui carry him was a rare experience for Dihao. He finally felt some fatherly love. No, I have been an orphan since young. Difui was shocked and stared at him fixedly. He wanted to know more, but he also knew that he could not ask Dihao. Otherwise, he would break a lot of heavenly laws and would attract another disaster. He held the child's arm tightly and smiled. However, who gave you your name? My mother. Why didn't your father name you? Dihao shook his head. I don't know. Perhaps he didn't have time? Difui was speechless. The amount of information that he was extracting from Dihao's words was overwhelming. He took a deep breath and kissed him on his face. However, you have a good name. Your mother must be very talented. Here, let me teach you how to reconfigure the starry array. Good. Dihao was very obedient. He understood that his father had guessed something. Since Difui was explaining each step to him, he naturally took more time than before. Nonetheless, perhaps due to their blood bond, Dihao managed to pick everything up rather quickly. In fact, he even applied his own set of unique techniques, which matched with those illustrated by Difui. Thus, the effect was actually stronger. When the process was almost done, Difui allowed Dihao to practice what he had learned in the starry array. Together, the father and son began to reconfigure the array, and they managed to catch up on any delays from before. After sorting out the arrangements of the stars in the array, Difui needed to free the grievances in the array to be genuinely successful. However, he did not do so this time because these grievances had provoked his son. Those grievances that once disturbed Dihao were all wiped out by Difui. Dihao looked at Difui in awe and felt a warmth in his heart. It turned out that his father could also pamper him. Even though he was happy, he seemed to look down for a moment. He remembered the fact that he had traveled through space and time just to change the tragic fate of the future. In fact, it had changed a bit, right? He would give his father and mother a good life. This family of four could stay together for a long time. Anyone or anything would not be able to separate them anymore. He clenched his fists tightly at the thought of his new direction. Gu Shijio was waiting outside impatiently. She had accompanied Difui to break one starry array before, and she knew that he should have been done. Why was he taking so long? Just when she wanted to go in and check on the two, they emerged from the cave. Although it was rare for Difui to be late, what was even more surprising was the fact that he was carrying his son. They seemed to be talking and laughing happily. What happened? Gu Shijio raised her eyebrows while Dihao looked up at her and turned to look at his father. Difui rubbed his hair and said, Do you want your mother to carry you? Dihao nodded cautiously. Chapter 2602. If someone dared to hurt them, he would make sure to return the favor 100 times over. Difui was rarely so generous. He handed Dihao to Gu Shijio as he said, Be obedient. Don't try to be mischievous with us. Dihao finally found himself in Gu Zijia's embrace. It was warm in his mother's arms, with a unique faint aroma that was different from his father's. He stretched out his small arm and gave Gu Shijio a big hug before saying, Mother, let me go. I am already able to run. You are pregnant, and it is inconvenient for you to carry me. Don't hurt little sister Shiyue. He struggled out from Gu Zijia's arms and walked forward. Gu Shijio was rendered speechless by what the little boy had said. She turned to Difui and spoke, It seems that you and your son have gotten really close. You have even told the little guy the name of our future daughter. Difui held her waist and walked forward with her. I didn't say anything. This little guy can predict the future. He still has that ability? It seems things are not as simple as we thought. Of course, this kid is a genius. He can learn things very quickly. Did you teach him how to dismantle the starry array? Yes. I also taught him how to read the stars. Gu Shijio half-jokingly added, This is your prime skill which should not be passed to anyone aside from your own children. Why were you willing to pass it on to this little kid? I like him and treat him as though he is my own son. Difui looked at the little boy who was running around in front of him. A light smile appeared on his face. With his wife beside him and his son at the front, the warm sunshine that shone on their bodies created the shadow of a family of three on the ground. They were tall and short, and coincidentally crossing each other. It looked very pleasant. Despite the loving sight, Difui's facial expression suddenly turned serious. This was his family, the people he loved and cared for the most in his life. He would do whatever he could to make sure they did not have to suffer from any physical pain or mourn the loss of their family members. As a man, he had to be strong enough to protect the kid around him and the woman in his arms. If someone dared to hurt them, he would make sure to return the favor 100 times over. According to what Di Hao had said earlier, he had met with an accident when he was still young. It seems that Gu Shijio had not spent a lot of time with Di Hao back when he was a kid in his own timeline. Perhaps something might have happened to Gu Shijio. Otherwise, Di Hao would not have claimed that he was an orphan since he was a child. Now, this fetus in Gu Zijia's body was going to be Di Hao's sister. Following from what he told Di Fudi, both Gu Shijio and himself had met with an accident after Di Hao was born. Based on his estimations, it might still be 2 to 3 years away from today. 2 to 3 years were enough for him to plan everything he needed. He planned to get rid of everything unfavorable to his family. At this point, the only thing that posed a threat to them was probably the black man who carried the identity of Zhu Duqing. It seemed that Di Fui still had to try to lure him out and get rid of him altogether. Quietly, Di Fui started to think of a way to lure him out. Well, who are you thinking about? Gu Shijio knew Di Fui very well, and she could detect the change in his emotions from some of his subtle movements. Di Fui laughed. I was thinking, Shijio, when do we want a second child? Gu Shijio was speechless. The first child was still a small fetus in her tummy, and he had already pondered about their second child. What happened? Why was he thinking so far ahead? It takes a lot of work to raise a child. Let's wait until the birth of this child before we think of the next one. We should raise this one first before considering a second child. Does that mean that after the birth of our daughter, I will have to wait a few years before having another kid? Of course. Do you want me to be pregnant all the time? Of course not. Di Fui suddenly lifted her joyfully and continued. I agree that we should not hurry. Let's wait for a few decades first. Gu Shijio remained silent. Chapter 2603. No, you were too ugly. There was too big a gap, which made Gu Shijio rather curious. What? What do you mean? Gu Shijio did not speak, but just stared at him. Di Fui proceeded to kiss her on her eyes. Stupid. Having you pregnant has made my life so inconvenient. I naturally don't want our second child to come so soon. Gu Zijia's face was hot as she playfully pushed him away. Pervert. Di Fui merely laughed. Di Hao, who was some distance in front of them, could not help but glance back. He saw his father lovingly hugging his mother, which looked so beautiful as if it were a portrait, except for the fact that he could feel the sweetness and warmth radiating from them. His eyes suddenly got a little teary, so he raised his hand and rubbed it. Coincidentally, it was at that moment that the family of 3 had just left the official residence of the previous city owner. The people outside automatically clustered themselves to both sides of the street to make way for them. They first heard the laughter of the Lord, which was magnetic and clear. It was so pleasant to hear that it could probably make their ears pregnant. Then they saw a little doll that looked soft and gentle run out, followed by a man in a white robe holding a woman in a green dress. The sharp-eyed people saw that the little doll's eyes were a bit red and then looked at the Lord and his wife, who were behind the little baby. They inevitably felt resentful for the little baby. The little baby was still so young. It was at an age where his parents were naturally expected to carry him. Instead, they only saw his father busy entertaining his wife. It was child abuse. No wonder the baby felt as if he was wronged. There was a woman who could not bear to see it and stepped forward. She opened her arms to Di Hao and said, "Little kid, come, let me carry you." Di Hao quickly stepped back and looked at the woman. She was gorgeous and possessed a slender body figure. She was a famous beauty in this city who had never met any man who could match her. After she saw Di Fui, she was naturally attracted to the man. In fact, she suddenly felt that she had finally met her true love. Unfortunately, this godlike man had a beloved woman around him. She could tell that his eyes were full of love, and there was no space for another woman. How could she ever make an impression on such a person? Seeing little Di Hao teary-eyed gave her an idea. All she had to do now was to be courageous enough to offer to carry the little doll. Therefore, she planned to use Di Hao as a way for Di Fui to notice her existence. She unexpectedly rushed out, thinking that she could hold Di Hao in her arms, but had not predicted the little guy's reactions to be so fast. He stepped back in time and was able to dodge her arms. At this moment, the little guy's eyes were bright and watery. When he looked at her, there was a wave of light in his eyes that actually made her heart tremble. She smiled, revealing the most charming smile that she could, and said, "Baby, can I carry you?" She had half bent her body, but her face was still facing Di Fui from the side. She knew that she looked most beautiful from the side, especially when she smiled. Usually, it would catch the attention of any man. Sadly for the woman, Di Hao shook his head and replied, "No, you are too ugly." It came as an utter shock for the woman, whose face turned pale in an instant. What was wrong with the little guy's eyes? How could he claim that she was ugly? "Little guy, if I am ugly, who do you think is beautiful?" The woman asked unwillingly. "She is my mother." Di Hao's little hand was pointing at Gu Shijio. Chapter 2604. Her husband was too attractive. The insulted woman could not help but look at the beauty in Di Fui's arms. At first, the woman could not see her appearance because Gu Shijio was not facing her. However, it was probably Di Hao's movement that caught her attention and made her turn to them. As the woman finally managed to see Gu Shijio, her pretty face instantly turned pale. Although she was undoubtedly beautiful, she was like a firefly, while Gu Shijio was like the moon. It was unreasonable to compare the two. Embarrassed, she turned and rushed back into the crowd to hide. Gu Shijio's lips were slightly curved at the corners. She did not expect little Di Hao to dismiss such a peach for his father in just a few words. Her husband was too attractive. It was completely expected for him to have a few peaches come his way. Instead of waiting for Di Fui to say something witty, she openly hugged his neck to declare her ownership of the man. No other woman should waste their time pursuing him. The family of three went directly into a restaurant to eat. An elegant room was prepared early for them, and the restaurant's best chefs made a table full of delicious dishes for them. Since the starry array had been completely dismantled, the city sky now had rays of long-lost sunshine. Joyful scenes filled the streets around the city. While eating, Di Fui received updates from his subordinates. As Di Fui had only destroyed the starry arrays in 3 cities, his subordinates were guarding the other starry arrays to prevent Zhu Duqing from attacking them. However, no one had seen Zhu Duqing. Meanwhile, Kuan Shui had met with Yin Yanli since the big battle. Kuan Shui raised his hand to greet the man despite all the troubles he had gone through. Yin Yanli just nodded to him to acknowledge and walked past him. I think that Yin Yanli is also looking for Zhu Duqing to get his revenge. Sigh, I hope that he doesn't find him. Since he is alone, I am afraid Zhu Duqing will kill him. Di Fui only answered briefly before ending the conversation. Gu Shijio listened for a moment and asked Di Fui, "Where do you think Zhu Duqing is hiding?" In fact, I am somewhat puzzled. I thought that once his conspiracy was exposed, he would sneak into the starry arrays of the other cities and create a mess. But he hasn't. Di Fui pondered for a moment, but did not answer her question. Instead, he raised his hands and placed a chessboard on the table. He passed her the black pieces. "Do you remember how the 2 people in the dream played chess? Let's imitate it, shall we?" Gu Shijio raised her eyebrow. "What? If you can remember, try to imitate how the man in black made his moves. The more you can remember, the better." Gu Shijio bit her lips. "I can remember every move." This time, it was Di Fui's turn to be shocked. "Really? There are usually more than 100 pieces. There were normally 361 pieces, 180 white and 181 black pieces. Therefore, Di Fui could not fathom how she could remember everything." Gu Shijio raised her head high and confirmed, "I remember the whole game of chess. Their game had more than 500 pieces and was much more complicated." Di Fui remained silent. "Can you still remember the arrangement of the pieces on the board?" "Of course." Swiftly, Di Fui placed his hand on the board to erase its markings. "Draw it again." Gu Shijio did not hesitate to comply with his request. Chapter 2605. How can I be your mother if I am not powerful? Di Hao was now full from his meal at the restaurant. He came next to Gu Shijio to observe what she was doing. Secretly, He really admired his mother for being so talented. Being able to remember the exact chessboard and pieces was something out of this world. Although Gushijio had somehow forgotten the specific conversation between the two people in her dream, she strangely remembered the entire layout of the complicated game and how it unfolded. In just a brief moment, Gushijio was able to carve out the chessboard and explain the rules of the game to Difui. As the rules were quite complicated, Gushijio thought that she might need to repeat the rules to him at least 2 to 3 times. It was certainly beyond her expectation that after having only explained 1/3 of the rules, Difui already began to play the game. No need to go on. I understand it. Let's start. He was indeed the former master of the heavenly law. Even if he had lost his memories, some of the motor skills were still in his bones. Hence, he understood the nature of the game after only listening to a few parts of the instruction. Without wasting any more time, the two of them started playing a game together. Gushijio played the black pieces in the precise way that the man in black played it in her dream. She purposely wanted to see if Difui would be able to beat the man in black from her dream. The room went quiet, and there was only the sound of the chess pieces falling on the board. Dihao silently looked at them. He found that his father's way of playing chess was slightly different from before. In the dream, the master of heavenly law was decisive in eliminating his opponent's pieces and blocking all the possible routes of his opponent. He gave up any chess pieces that he needed to win the match. He had the determination to sweep through everything that blocked his path to victory. Also, he had no personal feelings invested in the game. His bold moves and sacrifices had won in the game before. The manner in which Difui played the game this round showed that he had a different temperament. He would try to keep many pieces as possible and played rather conservatively. Nonetheless, when he needed to give up a piece, he would not hesitate to do so. As for Gushijio, no matter how Difui played, she just followed the steps of the man in black. When this game went down to the wire, Difui actually lost. He lost. Gushijio looked up at him in utter shock. She expected him to win because the master of the heavenly law had won. Perhaps, although he knew the rules of the game, he was still inexperienced. These few moves had cost you the game. You should have. Gushijio subconsciously picked up his white pieces and told him how to win. Difui smiled and looked at her. He did not talk, but watched how she rearranged the white pieces step by step in the way she remembered. It was such a complicated game, and so he watched her in admiration. Even Dihao also fully respected her. Although he was in the dream with Gushijio, he did not remember the game so well. He was certain that he would not be able to replicate the game. This made him wonder who Gushijio might have been in her previous life. After a few minutes, Gushijio finally finished putting the black and white pieces back on both sides. White was supposed to win. Difui turned a cup in his hand and looked at the game unfold step by step. He seemed to be thinking of something. Gushijio noticed this, but did not bother him and let him slowly ponder about what he was thinking of. Mother, your memory is too good. I have never met anyone like you. Dihao took an orange and began to peel it. He put some pieces in Guzijia's hand and continued. You are too powerful. Gushijio smiled. How can I be your mother if I am not powerful? Chapter 2606. Would he give up so easily? Gushijio was certainly delighted by Dihao's sweet words. Furthermore, after finding out that Difui was the master of the heavenly law, she somehow viewed him as a saint that had too high a status for her. Undoubtedly, she felt a little inferior in her heart. Nonetheless, that inferiority was gone. She was more certain of herself and her abilities. In some respects, she was even more skilled than Difui. Gushijio in a good mood, so she carried Dihao and placed him on her lap. However, you're still young. Don't have to serve me. Come, tell me what you want to eat. I will peel it for you. The little kid's mother was so loving and gentle. Dihao lifted his hand and grabbed a handful of melon seeds and placed it in Guzijia's hand. Mom, let's eat this together. Although this was a very kind gesture, Gushijio remained silent as she pondered. This situation was very familiar to her. It was as if she saw it unfold for the second time. Nevertheless, subconsciously, She had started peeling the seeds for Di Hao. Di Fui suddenly spoke. I think that Zhu Duqing must have left the Shuro world. What? Gu Shijie was surprised and raised her eyebrows. She looked at him to see if he was serious. She thought that he was occupied with the chessboard. Why did he suddenly talk about Zhu Duqing? Do you think he's given up? Gu Shijie asked. This person had masterminded such an extensive plan and spent so much effort in the Shuro world to see it through. Would he give up so easily? Di Fui explained. By observing his style of playing chess, this person is good at camouflaging himself. Every move he makes seems to be harmless, but is hiding a potent attack. Everything is somehow connected in a complicated way. Once he confirms that his plan is exposed, he will not hesitate to abandon everything and throw away all his pieces to start again. From the moves he made in the game, we can infer his style of action. Since his conspiracy has been exposed, the people will refuse to follow him, and Yun Yanli will not listen to him anymore. If he stays here, it will not help him go back to his original plan. Therefore, it is very likely that he would have abandoned everything. It turned out that he asked her to imitate the man in black, so that he was able to study his strategies and predict his next move. He had always analyzed people from unexpected aspects, and he had done so again today. Gu Shijie knew that Di Fui's analysis was always accurate. He had never had a mistake, so she breathed a sigh of relief. She thought that Zhu Duqing would stay behind in the Shuro world to wait for an opportunity to attack them. Now it seemed that this worry was superfluous. They could reconfigure the starry arrays and set the Shuro world back to the right path. As it turned out, Di Fui's analysis was correct. They never saw Zhu Duqing even when the starry array in the Shuro world was taken down. This man had disappeared, and no one had seen him. As the last starry array was dismantled, a strong breeze seemed to blow through the entire place and clear out the haze that covered all the cities here. There is spiritual power. Gosh, there is spiritual power now. I can feel the spiritual power between the sky and the earth. Great. We don't have to hunt the beasts anymore. We can freely absorb the essence of the world. Long live the Lord. Long live Miss Gu. When the people saw the clear sky again and felt the spiritual energy of the land, they were clearly ecstatic. People cheered and jumped around on the street. They held each other and danced. Some even cried, while others tried to wipe away their tears of joy. The alpha males even ripped off their shirts to express their excitement. They shouted and ran around the street half naked. As for Gu Shijie, when the first spiritual power of the earth appeared, her whole body shone with a bright light that seemed to pull her into the air. Chapter 26:07. Leaving Di Hao was stunned. Mother! Was his mother being struck by lightning? Di Fui grabbed him aside and said, Don't be nervous. Your mother's skills are returning to her. Di Hao's eyes lit up as he looked up into the air. Gu Shijie was still absorbed inside the white light, with her eyes closed. Fortunately, it did not look like she was in pain. After a while, the white seemed to burst into the air, while Gu Shijie gracefully returned to the ground in a white outfit with a faint auspicious light behind her body. Apparently, it was the standard outfit donned by a great deity. Everyone in the crowd was in awe of what they had seen. Di Hao's eyes lit up too as he watched his mother majestically make her way down. As for Di Fui, he had a broad smile on his face, but soon changed. Quickly, he leaped into the air towards her and said, Be careful. Apparently, there was an oversized vortex behind Gu Shijie. Upon observation, the whirlpool seemed to be made of circles of purple, red, and yellow. Later, Di Fui realized that it consisted of 7 colors. The center of the vortex was bright red and looked extraordinarily eye-catching. Although it had caught everyone's attention, no one was prepared for what happened next. Even Gu Shijie did not have time to look back as her body was sucked into the portal-like structure. She disappeared in the blink of an eye. Shijie. Di Fui called for her as he rushed forward. He was moving forward at breakneck speed, but the vortex disappeared too quickly. Di Fui and Di Hao were stunned, while everyone in the crowd remained silent. It was so quiet that all they could hear was the gentle breeze in the air. Once the vortex had disappeared, the sky was clear again, and the Shura world had been restored to its usual tranquility. Everything was back to normal, except for the woman in white who was swallowed by the colorful vortex. When the incident occurred, the 8 guardians of the Devil Kingdom were all present. Disbelieving, they felt as though they had been struck by lightning as they stood and looked at one another. Meanwhile, Di Fui levitated in the air at the location where the vortex had appeared before. The wind blew across his robes fiercely. Feng Ruhua and the rest finally came to their senses and quickly ordered their soldiers to search for Gu Shijio. You don't have to look for her. She has already left the Shura world. Di Fui finally gave his input. It was a heavenly punishment to send her into the Shura world. Now that the Shura world had returned to normal, it was time for her to return to where she had come from. Di Hao quickly went to Di Fui's side and asked, "Father, what do we do now?" Di Fui took a deep breath as he responded, "Well, we naturally have to leave." Before he came to the Shura world, Shun Juli had told him the way to leave this place. The method was somewhat complicated as it was necessary to prepare a range of items. It could take at least 2 years to collect all the necessary materials. The Devil King had been here for more than a year and had collected some of the elements along the way, but there were still a few essential materials that he could not obtain until the Shura world returned to normal. Di Fui would need to wait for another year for those materials to grow. His original plan was to travel around the Shura world with his wife and kid once he successfully dismantled the last starry array. He could pick up any treasures here for his daughter during his travels. He only planned on bringing them back to the upper bound after his daughter was born. After all, the technique consumed a lot of spiritual power, and the process was intense. It was not safe for Gu Shijio to travel during her pregnancy, or even when the child was too young. As expected, his plan was very thorough. He had even thought of the places that he wanted to bring his family here in the Shura world. All the more reason why he was left so stunned when things changed so abruptly. Chapter 26:08. Leaving, 2. In the spur of the moment, Di Fui remembered something that Gu Shijio had told him before. It seemed that the last time she was pulled into the whirlpool, she felt like she fell into a sea of knives that slashed her body thousands of times. She thought that perhaps it was because of the excruciating pain that she had lost her memory when she came to the Shura world. From what she had shared, it could be inferred that Gu Shijio would experience a painful journey back in the colorful vortex. Di Fui was especially concerned for her because she was now pregnant with their child. He was not sure if she would suffer a miscarriage. The man's fingers were tightly clenched under his sleeves. He heaved a sigh and flew toward the top of a nearby temple in the distance. What had happened? What did the Lord discover? Just when the crowd was about to rush to the temple to check on what Di Fui had found, they saw a flash of light on the top of the temple. A majestic cold figure suddenly appeared in the air, wearing faded white clothes. It was somewhat dirty as well, which made it seem as though this person had worn it for some time. In fact, one of the person's sleeves was missing. There was beard stubble around the person's lips, which made him look rather haggard. It was Yun Yanli. He was no longer as proud and arrogant as before. In actuality, he looked very much like an old and lonely man. Di Fui had noticed him earlier, even though he used an invisibility spell to hide himself. He did not bother the man and let him watch as everything unfolded. However, now that Gu Shijio was gone, he immediately exposed Yun Yanli's presence. Di Fui, what are you doing? Yun Yanli sounded cold. Although he was forced out by Di Fui, he was not panicked. Instead, he sneered. Do you think that I am the one who created the colorful whirlpool that took her away? Don't think so highly of yourself. You don't have this ability yet. Di Fui interrupted him. Yun Yanli choked on his words and sneered again. Why have you exposed my presence? Do you intend to treat me as your punching bag? Di Fui was too lazy to beat around the bush. He went straight to the point. Tell me the fastest way to leave the Shura world. I believe that you know of a way. Please don't change the topic. Yun Yanli remained silent. He didn't know the way. After all, he had gone back and forth many times. But why would he tell him? Although he learned that his parents had died because of Zhu Duqing, he still blamed the incident on the divine couple. Despite Di Fui's help to free their souls from despair, Yun Yanli was not ready to help him that easily. Moreover, Di Fui had made him lose an arm not too long ago. He looked up and condescendingly spoke. "I know the way out, but why would I tell you?" Di Fui squinted his eyes at the man, but did not respond. Yun Yanli continued, "Of course, you can cut my other arm off or simply kill me. I don't care. None of those methods are going to make me reveal the way out." Obviously, Yun Yanli had now become emotionless. He was no longer afraid of death. Perhaps he was no longer afraid of anything. People who had nothing to lose were the hardest to negotiate a deal with. Ku and Shui originally wanted to jump in and say a few words. However, since Yun Yanli spoke in such an unhelpful manner, he simply smacked his head instead. The onlookers had now regarded Di Fui as their savior. As for Yun Yanli, most people still hated him. They still blamed him for using the starry arrays for his own benefit. He had plagued many innocent lives. Seeing his unwillingness to help Di Fui certainly made them infuriated. Many had cursed him from below, branding him as an ungrateful person. Chapter 26:09. Leaving 3, the crowd had clearly picked their side as they continued to bombard Yun Yanli with their dissatisfaction. However, no matter what was said about him, he looked indifferent. It seemed as though he was really numb to the core. He only stared at Di Fui and smiled at his current predicament. Finally, he was able to watch the man suffer. Nonetheless, Di Fui did not let him enjoy this feeling for long. He signaled his subordinates. Enfeng Ruhua emerged with a person in the crowd. This person was none other than the young palace master. How she carried herself as somewhat awkward as she had tried to keep a low profile by dressing like an ordinary village girl. Being monitored by the 8 guardians, they knew that she had been frantically searching for her master. Due to the terrible image that she now had among the people, she was afraid that they would recognize her, so she disguised herself appropriately to stay under the radar. Her endless search left her miserable and pale as she could not sleep or eat well over the past few days. Once she was made aware that Di Fui and Gu Shijio were going to dismantle the last starry array, she predicted that Yun Yanli would be there to witness it. After all, the man's last few years have been dedicated to building and protecting these arrays. She knew that he would want to be there to see it. That sparked a glimmer of hope in her heart and brought her here. As she made her way through the crowd, she could not sense Yun Yanli's presence, which left her disappointed. It was beyond her expectations that Di Fui would expose him. She resisted the urge to reach out to him and hid in the crowd first to assess the situation. Nevertheless, if Yun Yanli were to be in danger, she would surely rush forward to save him even if she had to sacrifice her life. Unfortunately for the young palace master, before the opportunity presented itself, someone had already patted her from behind. Her limbs went numb as she turned slowly to the back to see that Feng Ruhua had found her. Seconds later, she was pushed out of the crowd. The snake that was wrapped around Feng Ruguo's wrist was now wrapped around her neck, and the snake's head was slowly approaching her carotid artery. The young palace master had no doubts that this snake could take away her life. Yun Yanli slightly frowned at what he had seen. Di Fui, why have you gotten her involved? To threaten you. Di Fui was straightforward. You are now the Lord, yet you still resort to such filthy methods. I could be more filthy. Yun Yanli was somewhat surprised by his frankness. He sneered condescendingly as he continued. Who do you think she is? She's just a better dog among my lousy subordinates. Do you think that I will be threatened by you because of a dog? The young palace master's pretty face turned pale in an instant. She disbelievingly looked at Yun Yanli and trembled. Did he really think of her as a dog? He clearly said that she was his friend, and he even promised to marry her someday. Was all that a lie? The eyes of the young palace master turned reddish as she stared at Yun Yanli intensely. Yun Yanli did not look at her. Perhaps he simply could not. The young palace master finally spoke. Yun Yanli, do you really treat me as your dog? Yun Yanli closed his eyes and did not answer her question. However, his silence had already revealed his answer. The young palace master grew desperate. She sneered. Well, you have certainly fooled me. Suddenly, she kneeled, opened her mouth, and wanted to bite the red snake that was hovering over her cheeks. The red snake was very poisonous, and it would certainly be fatal to her if she had taken a bite of it. Seeing her current intention, it was clear that she was looking for death. Yin Yanli's facial expression changed when he noticed what was going on down below, and he seemed to move slightly. However, Di Fui responded faster than him. He appeared to fire something toward the head of the red snake that had its mouth wide open in front of the young palace master's face. As a result, the young palace master failed to bite the snake in her first attempt. Fortunately, Feng Ruhua was nearby and managed to seal her acupuncture point to prevent the young palace master from taking her own life again. Chapter 26:10. Leaving 4. Yin Yanli's reaction had clearly shown that he genuinely cared for the young palace master. He did not want to see her die, at the very least. He took a quick look at Di Fui, and they seemed to have reached a mutual understanding without any exchange of words. The two of them were both very smart men. Naturally, they understood each other's positions. Yin Yanli let out a long sigh, but was finally ready to compromise. "I can take you there, but you must promise me something in return. State your request. When you finally find Zhu Duqing, allow me to join the fight. Are you sure that you are giving yourself a reason to die?" There would certainly be an earth-shattering battle between Di Fui and Zhu Duqing. It would certainly be unsafe for any ordinary people to join. Without an arm, Yin Yanli would be a handicap fighter. His involvement would spell his inevitable death. He pinched his lips into a thin line and took a few swings with his left arm. "I did not tell you that I am actually left-handed. I am better at wielding my sword with my left hand. If you do not believe me, we can have a quick spar right now." Di Fui was reluctant to fight him. The only thing he wanted now was to return to heaven as soon as he could, so he agreed to the condition. Yin Yanli seemed relieved. "Great. This time, I'm coming with you." "Master, I shall go with you." "Master, I too shall go with you." Feng Ruhua and her men all volunteered themselves to follow Di Fui and assist him in the final battle with the Black Bamboo Man. However, Di Fui refused their requests. These guardians were natives from the Shuro world, specifically the Devil Kingdom. They would not be able to adapt to the living conditions in heaven, as the celestial aura could possibly be lethal to them. Besides, Feng Ruhua dared not go against his commands, so she gave the rest of the guardians a quick, helpless look before retreating. "Don't forget me. I have had enough of this lousy place." "Master, take me with you," Kuan Shui firmly said while stepping forward with Di Hao in his hand. Di Hao was also taking Xie with him. Since the gentlemen had reached an agreement, Feng Ruhua quickly set the young palace master free by unblocking her acupuncture points. The hostage was no longer needed. "Ming Dai, I am no longer your master. You need not follow me around anymore." Yin Yanli had to make it clear to her once and for all. Unfortunately for her, he was never attracted to the young palace master. She was merely a tool in his plan. She had always been a loyal companion to him. As time went by, their friendship was slowly built. But friendship was all that he had for her. Moreover, he had failed his mission and no longer had the desire to conquer the world. Hence, he could not fulfill his promise to make her the future celestial concubine. It would be better to set her free, he thought. The young palace master's face grew pale. She knew how serious Yin Yanli was whenever he made a statement. Although she was unhappy with his decision, she did not refute it. Helplessly, she watched as Yin Yanli performed a spell and opened up a passage to heaven. Slowly, his figure faded in the light until he finally disappeared entirely. The young palace master simply looked down in disappointment with her fists clenched. "Don't you want to follow them?" Feng Ruhua approached her and asked. "He did not let me." "Silly. How can you give up just because of what he said? This is not the right way to pursue a man. You need to pursue the man tirelessly. It is easy for a woman to attract the heart of a man," Feng Ruhua said in a comforting manner while playing the role of an elder sister. "But, no buts. I just need to know if you want to go after him or not." "I want to, but I do not have enough power to open up the passage." "It does not matter. As long as you know the way, we can do the rest," Feng Ruhua continued to persuade her. It seems that you are the one who wants to go along. The young palace master finally realized her intention. Smart. We're not doing it solely for you. So are you in? The young palace master took some time to think about the proposition. Yes, she finally said. Feng Ruhua was happy with her answer. Great. We'd better start now. Let's begin. The young palace master shook her head. Not now. We need some specific things to activate the passage. I need to collect the materials. Meet me here in 10 days. As long as they were able to leave the place, the guardians were willing to see out the 10 days. Chapter 26:11 Returning Dam. It was Gu Zijia's first word after being swallowed by the vortex. She was not against the idea of returning to where she came from, but a warning would have been appreciated as she needed to take Di Fui and little Di Hao along with her. All alone, she was spinning at high speed in the whirlpool, as if venturing into a high-tech washing machine. This time, the sensation she felt was not as bad as before. Also, her spiritual power was not reduced at all. The only unbearable thing was the fact that she had to spin through the entire process. There was no way she could leave the vortex, so she could only submit to providence. Intuitively, she placed her hands on her tummy securely to make sure that nothing would happen to the baby. She assumed that she would be taken back to the place in which she had come from, and frankly, did not mind. At least, she would get to reunite with the muscle and Lu Wu. She had missed them dearly. The muscle, too, missed her very much. It had been crying every day since her unplanned departure. As soon as she returned to the celestial devil continent, she planned to go straight to them. Then, she would visit Long Sai before returning to the starry crescent land. She had been away for 2 years now, and was worried that something might have happened, though she certainly hoped not. After all, in the modern days, the earth seemed to be doing fine without a lord. Dawn! Gu Shijio was shocked by a sudden splash of water. Soon, she found herself drenched. Her eyes went blurry as she started to feel dizzy from the impact. Fortunately, her spiritual power as a great deity managed to keep her alive. She opened her eyes and saw a lengthy blue river with sparkling water that tasted bad. It was somehow both salty and bitter. Nevertheless, it was a familiar taste, seawater. But which sea was she at? The only sea in the celestial devil continent was the Luosha Sea. Was she really there? She wondered why she did not remember falling from the sky this time. How did she end up in the water right away? She had not even seen how the sky looked like. Upon impact, she had already found herself more than 10 meters underwater. As a good swimmer, she intuitively started swimming toward the surface as soon as she was thrown into the sea. Splash! 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 From a distance, something started to drift towards her at the speed of light. She focused her attention on the fast-moving figures and could immediately recognize them. Those figures had crystal blue hair and seemed to be wearing some body-hugging wetsuits. The most noteworthy part about them was their beautiful fishtails. They were indeed some really beautiful mermaids. She never knew that mermaids existed in the celestial devil land. Before Gu Shijio could make up her mind, the mermaids were already swimming by her side in a very anxious manner. Quick! Quick! They are here to catch us again. One of the mermaids quickly warned her. Who was the mermaid referring to? Were the celestial beings here so bored that they started messing with the mermaids? It did not seem very likely. Although the mermaids lived with the fishes, they were actually considered more like humans. Mermaids certainly shared the same level of intelligence as them at the very least. Nevertheless, being new here, Gu Shijio was pretty much confused. She watched as the mermaids swiftly swam away. Gu Shijio did not follow them. Instead, she started swimming in the opposite direction. She needed to find out more about the people who were going after those mermaids. Also, she needed more information about her current location. After swimming 2 or 3 meters, she stopped abruptly and gasped in disbelief. Chapter 26:12 Returning. 3 other mermaids were swimming nearby as a large fishnet was shot at them. It would appear that the mermaids were hotly pursued. A fishnet was undoubtedly not a strange thing to see at sea, but a fishnet that was installed with both tracking and navigation systems was definitely unusual. The fishnet was traveling just as fast as the mermaids, like a torpedo, and the mermaids were about to fall into the trap. Help! The mermaids were desperate, so they called out to Gushijio for help. Gushijio noticed their state of despair and decided to teleport to them right away. Unfortunately, she ended up being a prey in the net as well, along with the other mermaids. As soon as they were caught in the net, they were pulled back up. Splash! The net was finally out of the water, and, alas, Gushijio could see daylight. What she saw next almost stunned her. She could not quite believe her eyes. It was a ship. Even though ships were the most common sight at sea, the one that she had just encountered was not quite the same. Instead of a sailing vessel, the ship actually resembled a giant spaceship that was afloat. Accurately speaking, it was not in contact with water. Instead, it was hovering above the surface of the water. What kind of ship was it? Could it be a hovercraft? A hovercraft would still come into contact with water, however. Furthermore, the vehicle in front of her was many times larger than a typical hovercraft. The ship looked more like an unidentified flying object that she was once told about. Dozens of armed men made their ways out of the cabin at once on noticing the catch. Gushijio was shocked at the sight of these armed men. Her heart thumped with astonishment as her mind went deeper into her thoughts. Had she gone back to the modern days? The armed men looked just like the people of the special forces. Without a doubt, these armed men were foreigners, as all of them were blonde with a prominent nose, and they had bluish-green eyes. Noticeably, they were all quite good-looking. One of them was carrying a small controller in his hand. With a flip and a press of the button, the net was then lifted onto the ship. Soon, Gushijio and the mermaids found themselves being threatened at gunpoint. Today's catch is good. We have got 3, enough for all of us to savor. Hey, there's also a 2-legged goat. A 2-legged goat? Gushijio had not been so humiliated in a long while. She squinted in disapproval and carefully observed the man and the gun that he was holding. The weapon looked very modern and fancy. However, she had never seen it before. Since Gushijio used to be an assassin, guns were some of the most common things in her life. She could fire almost any gun accurately. She was also skilled at putting a gun's pieces back together, even with her eyes closed. The gun in the hands of the captors looked like the most powerful gun she had heard of, the AKM. However, the body of the gun was so narrow that it did not seem like it could fire a bullet through the hole. What kind of gun was it? She took another look at the ship and was quite convinced by a crazy idea. She suspected that she had traveled through time and landed somewhere in the future. Everything seemed even more advanced than she could remember from back in her days in a modern world. As soon as the net was open, the 3 mermaids found themselves on the deck and started trembling in fear. One of them made a desperate attempt to escape by taking a leap into the water, but the men on the deck were not ready to let her go. Quick off the mark, one of them pulled the trigger to release a flash of blinding red light at the mermaid. He had an excellent aim and went for the mermaid's head. Obviously, he wanted her dead. Chapter 26:13, Returning 3 Swoosh. A shadow flashed before his eyes and disappeared along with the mermaid. The man gasped in disbelief as his companions were already exclaiming, "It is the 2-legged goat." The person who rescued the mermaid was certainly Gushijio. At this moment, she was standing gracefully on the deck with the mermaid secured in her left arm. All the guns were now pointed at her. She swept her eyes across these armed men and continued to wonder where she could be at this moment. Unexpectedly, she was alarmed by the mermaid's sudden question. "My lord," her voice was filled with an equal amount of surprise and wonder. Gushijio was still in shock, so she did not know how to respond. "Are you our lord? I have heard about your teleportation skills. You must be the lord." "My lord, you are finally back. Please help us all." The other 2 mermaids chimed, and a glimmer of hope could be seen in their eyes. She noticed that they had addressed her as their lord. Does that mean she traveled back to Starry Crescent Land instead of the future? Mermaids did exist in Starry Crescent Land, too. In fact, they were deeply related to Gushijio. After D. Fuyus immortalization, Gu Shijio assumed his role as the lord and managed to unify the fragmented sea clans as one, which included the mermaids. Gu Shijio studied the mermaids and was further reassured by their outfits. They dressed like the people of Blue Hill Continent. "Are you Lan Yegang's people?" Gu Shijio asked. "Yes. Yes, my lord. We are the people of Blue Hill Continent. Our master has been waiting for your return. Please, save us all from this misery. Many of us have been caught." The three mermaids fell onto the ground and bowed before her mighty presence. And with all the recent revelations, Gu Shijio was now certain that she did not travel to the future. Nonetheless, she still could not make sense of the flying vehicle and the special forces. "So, you are the lord that they have been endlessly talking about." "Huh, the lord is only a little girl." "The girl is pretty, little lady lord. Your dress looks exquisite. I bet you will look even better without these clothes. Come, let me give you a hand and help you undress." One of the men with big earrings stood out while laughing. As soon as he was finished with the harassment, he reached out his hand in a brave attempt to touch Gu Zijia's face. Even though he was bold, he was still cautious. While reaching out to Gu Shijio, he was still holding his gun with his finger resting on the trigger. He had to make sure that he held Gu Shijio at gunpoint, for if he encountered the slightest resistance, he would pull the trigger. Before he could fire his gun, he was distracted by a sudden, sharp pain on his wrist. In the next second, his wrist had already been cut off, and the gun in his hand had been taken away, too. The rest of the people were shocked by what they had seen. They did not hesitate to kill, so they all fired at Gu Shijio at once. Dozens of guns fired with great splendor, like fireworks, all aimed at the place where Gu Shijio just landed. They clearly saw that she landed, but she had also abruptly disappeared in a split second. The next thing they knew was that all of their hands had been cut off and that their guns were seized. By the time they could react, they were already empty-handed. Bang! Bang! Many guns could be heard firing at the same time, followed by the armed men screeching in agony. Their own guns injured every member of the special forces. Their knees and wrists both suffered from gun wounds. Helplessly, they knelt on the ground. Across the deck, Gu Shijio was standing firmly right in front of them, surrounded by a pile of guns. Those were the guns that she had seized from the armed men. In her hand, she was holding one, too. Chapter 26:14. Returning 4. The special forces all looked at her in disbelief while she continued to toil the gun in her hand like a professional. "Do you even know how to use a gun? When I learned how to use this, all of you were still babies, crawling around in your mother's wombs." Gu Shijio did not seem to hold back her professional qualities. Her aura was certainly intimidating and unrelenting. "It is time for me to question you. Where did you come from? Why did you come here and make my people suffer?" The armed men looked at each other confusedly. They knew that spells and magic existed, but the people they encountered were usually not strong enough to resist their advanced weapons, so they never really cared. Never had they thought that the Lord, whom everyone kept talking about, was an expert in the use of guns. From the way she carried one, they were all convinced. Although they were injured, the armed men refused to surrender and continued to give in to Gu Zijia's request. Getting tired of their games, she shot one of the men right in the head. He fell to the ground and was lifeless. "Answer my questions, or you will end up just as same," she warned while throwing another look at them. The woman was too cruel for them to play games with. Therefore, all of the armed men finally stopped messing around. One of them seemed to be sneakily reaching in his boots and was ready to retrieve the small gun that was kept hidden. However, he could not find it. "Are you looking for this?" Gu Shijio kicked aside a short, golden gun that was the size of a lipstick. The officer's face went pale. Quickly, the others reached into their boots as well, only to find that their weapon had been taken away. The woman was obviously not immortal. Other than the guns in their hands before, she had seized all of their hidden firearms as well. She must possess some compelling kung fu moves too, they thought. "We are from the year 2348. We are here to conquer the land. Lady, I reckon you must come from planet Earth. Have you time-traveled here? You're really good with guns. Nevertheless, since we are all from the same planet, we should help each other out. How can you abandon your own kind to save these mermaids?" Lady, it is best that you let us go. If the Admiral knows about this, he will surely be unhappy. You and your people are bound to suffer. Lady, I am telling you that we have almost conquered the entire land. Some stubborn ones are still resisting, but they will be dead soon. A wise woman should submit to fate and adapt her actions to the times. You should not make us your enemies. Gu Shijio quietly listened to their attempt to persuade her. Aside from a lot of useless information, she was able to come to a few conclusions. Firstly, these men had indeed come from the future. Almost a year ago, they invaded the place. The ship in the shape of a flying object was one of their means of transportation. Secondly, the Admiral was the highest person in command, with the final aim to conquer the entire Starry Crescent land and enslave every inhabitant. Thirdly, the men that she had encountered were amongst the weakest of the troops. They had been assigned with the worst type of weapons and with no experience in any sort of tactical operations. Their only mission was to hunt down the mermaids, as the mermaids' tears would turn into pearls, and their meat tasted good, which the leaders had a liking for. Also, mermaids' oil could make good fuel. In the past year, they had slaughtered thousands of mermaids, almost driving the beautiful species to extinction. Furthermore, almost all the people of the Starry Crescent land were either killed or imprisoned. The prisoners would be turned into slaves with no freedom or rights. The men had to work day and night for their survival. Meanwhile, the women had to become sex slaves to the soldiers. Chapter 26:15, A Massive Tragedy in Conclusion. The situation was very much like the Japanese invasion in China. The invaders brazened into the land and acted brutally with the help of their advanced weapons. Gu Zijia's heart sank at the realization. Her 2-year absence from the Starry Crescent land had caused such a massive tragedy. The Starry Crescent land had been around for so many years, but was never visited by any foreign troops from the future. What brought them here this time? How did it happen? Gu Shijio once read about a sci-fi novel about the possibility of inventing a time-traveling machine that allowed travelers to venture from one time period to another. She did not quite believe the theory at first, but she did not doubt it now. Seeing was believing. The technological advancement in the year 2348 was beyond amazing. Occupied in her thoughts, she did not notice something that came from above. "My lord, look out!" one of the mermaids warned. Gu Shijio looked up and saw a round spiral vortex above her. The vortex sucked up all the armed men from the deck. Once it was done, the place was peaceful again for a second before a large green net fell on Gu Shijio and the mermaids. The net was made with a special material that was rather dense and firm, like a layer of soft metal. Gu Shijio tried to break the net with her bare hands, but did not manage to damage it. Instead, she could feel a steady flow of electricity on her fingertips as soon as she touched the metal. Without any spiritual power to protect her, she would pass out upon touching the electrified net. Fortunately for her, the sensation faded away as soon as she used her spiritual power to suppress it. With nowhere to go, the 3 mermaids were frightened out of their wits and immediately regretted that they did not seize the opportunity to run away when Gu Shijio was dealing with the bad man. "My lord, what should we do?" "My lord, we do not want to die. Don't worry. I promise that you will all survive. However, I need you to continue acting in a state of panic." Gu Shijio directed an audio message to the 3 of them. They looked at one another in confusion, but decided to do as told and cried out even louder. As for the dozens of armed men who had just escaped death, they were relieved to be saved and watched Gu Shijio and the mermaids through the surveillance camera. From their point of view, they saw that Gu Shijio tried to tear the net apart forcibly, but ended up being electrified. Then, she sat quietly with her eyes closed. The soldiers were no longer as distressed as before. "Looks like the people's supreme leader is afraid of electricity," one of the men said contemptuously. "Of course, no one can possibly survive the electrical current. Supreme leader? She is nothing but a woman from the future who has become famous with a little kung fu tricks. If I came any earlier, I would have become their lord. All right, let's get her in." After all, she is our strongest opponent here. If we send her to our leader, it will be yet another achievement. They continued the heated discussion and came to the same conclusion that she was worth keeping. In order to prevent Gushijio from running away, they decided to keep the net on her as they moved her into one of the cabins. One of the men went to the control center and pressed a button. Streaks of light flashed by, displaying the projection of an officer in the middle of a room. His shoulder was full of silver badges indicating his status and level of achievement. Looking tall and strong, his stern appearance made him look like an authoritative figure. "Little bastards, what is the matter? How many mermaids have you got?" "Report, sir. We have got 3 mermaids and are now on the way to deliver them. This time, we will bring someone else with us. The mermaids call her their lord." Chapter 26:16. A Massive Tragedy. 2. The officer on the receiving end of the news was not entirely convinced. Their lord? Is it the imposter that everyone has been blabbering about? How did you manage to capture her so easily? It is true. That was how the mermaids addressed her. We noticed that she seemed to have mastered some modern aspects of Kung Fu. She's also good with guns. Rotate the camera toward her. I need to see her through the screen. Yes, sir. Seconds later, the big screen in the cabin displayed the 3 mermaids and Gushijio. The officer's eyes lingered a little longer on Guzijia's face, as if studying an object. A moment later, an evil grin appeared on his face. I cannot tell how capable she is, but she is stunning. I am aroused. Send her here quickly. I need to take a better look at her. If I am happy with the girl, I will reward all of you. Yes. The soldiers all went back to their respective positions, and the pilots started to maneuver the ship. From the outside, any passerby could easily notice the drastic change in the ship's appearance. In just a few clicks, its entire exterior seemed to have transformed into something completely different than before. Soon, the ship rose into the air and flew swiftly towards the west. As the ship was large and well-balanced, it did not take long for it to travel steadily. Once it did, the injured soldiers finally had the opportunity to treat their wounds. They could not stop cursing at the unpleasant experience. To make matters worse, all of their injuries were caused by their own guns. Out of frustration, one of them lashed out. "The woman moves incredibly fast. How did she know how to use our guns so precisely? I have not been hurt in a while, especially from a woman. Yes, if she had not seized our guns, there was no way that she could hurt us. All our uniforms have the ability to shield us against all sorts of spells and magic. It is only the high beam from these guns that can penetrate through our protective clothing." All right. At least we have got her in our hands now. The wounds are part and parcel of the achievement. All of us will be rewarded at the end of the day. Why did you think the officer was asking for her specifically? Is he going to send her away? The woman is the lord that everyone has been talking about. We should actually send her to the admiral. Our officer is always attracted to beautiful ladies. We have been here for around a year, and he has slept with a different girl every night. The girl is too beautiful for him to give away without sleeping with her first. Not everyone gets to sleep with a lord, you know. Huh. Their conversation had taken a sharp, perverted turn. Meanwhile, a gust of wind flurried by the side of one of the soldiers all of a sudden and caught his attention. It was almost as if he could smell the sea. The injured man trembled a little and looked at his fellow comrade, aghast. Is this place normally ventilated? That's impossible. The cabin is sealed. There is no room for any wind to enter. I could clearly feel the air flowing by just a second ago. Could there be a ghost in our vessel? A ghost? Nonsense. I'm a firm believer in the laws of physics and science. I never take these mythical things into account. It is hard to say. Many strange things exist in this world that is beyond explanation, just like their magic. I can somehow tell that their spells are as powerful as our guns, even though they are rather odd. How odd can they be when they are all enslaved? We have thoroughly beaten them. Actually, those that we have encountered thus far are the ones with the weakest spiritual power. You know, their spiritual power is actually categorized into different levels. The highest is level 9, and yet all that we have found are only at level 4. The stronger ones are all gathered at a specific place. The Admiral has been trying to tear the place down, and it seems like the fight will have to take some more time. We have suffered a great loss, too. Many lives lost on our part. I really do not know what the Admiral is thinking. The whole war can be ended with an antimatter bomb. All of them will be gone in an instant. Why should we waste our lives and resources in this endless fight? Chapter 26:17. A Massive Tragedy 3. Hush. Our leader knows what he is doing. We should not comment on such things. He will end our lives if he found out. All right, enough about the Admiral. His decisions are beyond our control. That is right. My only hope is that we can finally settle down here in Starry Crescent Land. I no longer want to wander about with no place to call home. I want some security in my life. Huh, Wong, are you joking? We are pirates of the galaxy. Our lives are supposed to be adventurous and deadly. Are you really longing for security? Damn, all these years have been tough. I cannot help but think about retirement already. In fact, I am starting to miss our own planet. Stop thinking about it. We are all wanted fugitives on our own planet. Going back means death for all of us. Now that we are here on this ship, we should do our best for the Admiral. At least, we get to eat well, drink well, and have a decent life. Their conversation carried on until one of them suddenly said, I can somehow feel that someone is watching us. Shocked, the others looked around the place, but saw nothing. Huang, you are overthinking. Huang scratched his head in confusion and said nothing more. Quietly, he continued to maneuver the ship. What the men did not see was that Gu Shijio was actually standing right in front of the control desk. She was observing how Huang controlled the buttons in order to make the ship fly. It was only her soul that was lingering around the place. However, no one could see her without her physical body. She could tell that the ship was still sailing slightly above the water. It was traveling at a really great speed, like a cannonball that was sent across the air. Since no one saw anything suspicious, the others continued to indulge in their conversation. Nonetheless, a moment later, someone suddenly complained, I feel so itchy. It's terribly uncomfortable. Unfortunately, before he could scratch away the uncomfortable sensation, he had to remove his protective clothing. Before anyone knew what had happened, the itch had started to spread across the room. Soon, everyone else in the room started complaining that their skin was itchy and took off their protective clothing as well. Apparently, all of them broke out in a terrible rash. The itching sensation was thoroughly uncomfortable. After scratching themselves for a while, they suspected that they might be having an allergic reaction to something, so they started consuming some anti-allergy medicine. The medicine, however, did not make them feel any better. Out of fear, they started scratching each other's skin just to see if they could recognize the rash. The pilot, Huang, was so uncomfortable that he started scratching his body on the control deck. His eyes were itchy, too, so he had to rub his eyes to seek some comfort. When he dropped his hands on the control panel again, he pressed some of the buttons by accident and opened one of the doors. As the door opened, a loud splash could be heard. Huang, you bastard! Which button did you press? You have thrown the net away. Someone exclaimed in anger. Huang immediately looked out the window and saw that their 3 captives had already been freed from the net. The 3 mermaids were already swimming away as fast as they could. They must have felt as though a miracle had happened to them for them to escape death today. Unfortunately, none of them took notice of the unconscious woman, who was still floating on the surface of the water. With a curse, Huang quickly lowered the ship so that he could recapture the woman with the net. Securely, he placed her in a sealed cabin again. Luckily for them, the officer only seemed eager to see the Lord. In fact, they were feeling too uncomfortable to care about the other 3 mermaids that had just escaped. Their first priority was to get this woman back to their commanding officer as quickly as possible. With a victorious smile, Gu Shijio watched as the mermaids escaped. She did not want them around in her plans anyway. She was the one responsible for the men's suffering. They should not have to pay any price for that. In actuality, she was the one who unlocked the door while Huang was busy rubbing his eyes. Hence, things were going according to her plan. The fact that her soul remained invisible had been a great help to her in retrieving information from the soldiers. At least, she managed to find out who these people really were. She also learned how advanced their weapons had been developed. Chapter 26:18. Revenge. More importantly, she knew how the people of the Starry Crescent Land were holding up in the fight. It seemed like there was still hope, since most of the skilled people here had not been annihilated. Mu Feng and his men must have joined forces in the resistance. She needed to find them. She also wanted to find the admiral that these men had spoken about. Playing hostage might be the fastest way for her to do so, after all. As soon as the ship took off, it traveled 100 times faster than sound. It was a smooth journey, however, due to the stability of the ship and its advanced technology. About an hour later, a city slowly became visible to them. Gu Shijio squinted her eyes in order to see it clearly. Soon, she recognized that it was Xingyao City, a place where the Feixing Kingdom used to settle its military affairs. Frustrated by what she saw, Gu Shijio clenched her fists tightly. Xingyao City was no longer the bustling place that it used to be. Commoners no longer roamed the streets. Instead, it was filled with arrogant and violent soldiers, each with multiple women in their arms. They walked around harassing people as they pleased, which was a completely revolting sight. One of the women noticeably decided to push one of the arrogant men away, which triggered the heavily bearded man into a fit. He kicked the woman away and did not even wait for her to get back up before stomping his foot on her hand. As expected, the woman screamed in pain. By the streets, some men were working tirelessly in construction. They all looked sallow and emaciated. Most of them were obviously carrying injuries on them, and none of their clothes were clean. Their ankles were chained, thus restricting their movement. Upon seeing the woman being harassed, all of them were very frustrated by the bearded man's aggressive mistreatment. One of them was so angry that he actually launched a strike at the man. What an animal! Let her go. His level 3 spiritual power supported his spell, and a ball of bright light could be seen headed toward the bearded man. Nonetheless, the bearded man tittered at the attempt without any intention to move away. The ball of bright light was extinguished once it made contact with the bearded man's body. He did not even flinch. What a pariah! How dare you attack an officer? One of the guards pressed a button, and it seemed to put the man in agonizing pain as he felt his knees at first and then rolled on the ground. His skin started to burn to the point where the small of flesh lingered in the air. The Lord will be back one day. She will get revenge for all of us. In the brief outburst of anger, the man no longer held back his frustration, for he knew he would not live long. All of you are animals. One day you will get a taste of your own medicine. The Lord will not show you any mercy. With tears and blood, he shouted out loud until his voice turned hoarse. "Ha! Where's the Lord? I bet this lady you speak of must be hiding somewhere. If she dares to show up, I will rape her on the spot and make her call me her daddy." The bearded man made an arrogant and shameless remark. While he was still laughing at his own humor, a warplane could be seen falling from the sky and crashing down at a blazing pace. In a matter of seconds, the bearded man and the team members close to him were crushed. Although they were wearing their protective clothing, there was no chance they could survive the impact of a falling craft if they were hit at a direct angle. After the dust settled, the body of the bearded man could be seen hanging at the tip of the warplane without any sign of life. On the other hand, his companions were mostly dead, if not fatally injured. The crash site was instantly filled with mourning and sorrowful sounds. As for the women, they quickly ran away as soon as the soldiers were distracted by the falling warplane. The warplane seemed to be targeted at the soldiers on the street. In fact, none of the women were hurt. They were shocked by the scene and stood in fear. Chapter 26:19. Revenge 2. Huang, are you out of your mind? The soldiers were frustrated with their pilot for crashing the warplane. I did not press anything. It suddenly went out of control. Huang tried to explain himself in a blind panic. Something is wrong. Something is really wrong. The warplane was stationary on the ground as the conversation took place. In a matter of seconds, loud banging noises could be heard on top of the aircraft. It was the sound of frustration coming from surviving soldiers who were mourning the loss of their dead companions. Huang did not know what to do. If he opened the door, he would surely be killed. The rest of his crew were scared, too. After all, they were part of the team. As they were contemplating the consequences of staying put or opening the hatchet, the warplane suddenly rose above the ground and started flying again. Those on the outside of the warplane slipped and fell from the vessel. Meanwhile, those on the inside were not having it any better either. They had lost their balance and rolled round in the cabin like dice. It was only after a period of time that they finally managed to get to their feet. Once they were aware of their surroundings, Huang noticed that the buttons on the control deck were moving automatically. The man was terrified as he could not see anyone there, yet the buttons seemed to be moving on their own. "It's the Lord. She must be messing with our controls." Huang was the first person to realize the problem. Nonsense. Isn't she trapped in the gossamer net? How can she possibly be controlling the vehicle? "Turn on the surveillance camera. Now." One of the men then rushed forward to press a button. The screen flickered slightly before displaying the scene in the cabin where Gu Shijio was imprisoned. To their dismay, all they saw was an empty net. The woman was nowhere to be seen. "It is her. It is really her. She has gone invisible." Huang and the rest of the men started to panic upon that realization. They quickly retrieved their guns and started frantically shooting at the control deck since they knew that their weapons would not damage it. If the high-powered laser beam were to hit a person, it would surely burn a hole through their body. Without the specific medicine required to treat the wound, the body would slowly rot, turning the flesh into a pool of pus. The laser beams flashed by densely, covering every area of the control deck. If someone were really there, he or she would be pierced with holes through their body. Seeing that there was obviously no chance for anyone to escape that attack, they finally stopped shooting and looked at one another. "The Lord should be dead by now," they thought to themselves. She couldn't escape such a blast. At this moment, the warship was hanging in mid-air like a floating machine. They were about to get closer to the control deck and have a look, but a sudden announcement interrupted them. "Paging, Warplane 138. Warplane 138. Please respond immediately." A broadcast suddenly came through. The men looked up and were shocked. Dozens of warplanes had surrounded them in a siege. One of the warplanes was unusually huge, almost twice the size of their own craft. "Sir, sir," Huang responded in a trembled voice. "Damn, what is going on here?" A stern voice could be heard from the broadcast. It was their commanding officer that they were on their way to meet. "We had lost control of our plane for a moment, but things are all right now." Lost control? Who was controlling the plane? It was the woman that we captured, the Lord. Bastard. If you had caught her, how did she control the plane? Where is she now? She could be dead. The conversation suddenly went silent for a moment. Bastard. Who asked you to kill her? The officer was obviously infuriated. Where's her body? Chapter 2620, Revenge 3. We have not found the body. We're going to look for it now. Indignant, the commanding officer was angered by the terse answer. What a bunch of idiots. Before Huang could check the area in front of the control deck, the warplane suddenly changed direction again. This time, it was lunging forward at full speed and was headed directly toward the massive warplane in front of them. No! The injured men in the warplane exclaimed as they were, once again, on the ground due to the intense and sudden movement of the vessel. Bastards! What are you doing? Stop it! Stop it now! If you don't, I will shoot you down. A series of verbal abuse came through the broadcast. Huang pulled himself together and went straight to the control deck, but was immediately repelled by an invisible wizardry barrier. He was sent across the air and crashed straight into a wall. The impact almost killed him. The rest noticed how severe the situation was, so they all made their way forward and tried to take back control of the warplane. They needed to make it stop, or that would spell the end of their lives anyway. Charging forward at full speed, all of them experienced the same fate as Huang and were repelled across the cabin. I will shoot now. Damn it. I will shoot you if you don't stop the plane at once. The commanding officer had run out of patience, and finally, he authorized the shooting. The men in the cabin struggled to their feet, only to see a giant missile headed toward them. It was at that time that Gu Shijio finally revealed herself. There she stood, in a dreamy white dress right next to the control deck. Gracefully, she turned around and bid these men farewell. Bye. This was the last word they heard, and she was also the last person they saw before a blinding circle of light engulfed the warplane. The commanding officer watched as the warplane was shattered into pieces and fell from the sky. His face sank in utter disappointment. He knew the power of the weapons he possessed. The plane, as well as every person on board, would surely perish. What a waste, he sighed. He had yet to meet the beautiful Lord. His warplane was currently hundreds of kilometers away from Xingyao City, but he insisted on returning. Get us back to the city, he swiftly commanded his crew. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 20 other warplanes responded in unison as soon as they received his command, and all of them turned their planes around and were ready to fly back to the city. Sir, aren't you going to look for the body of the Lord? What for? She is surely a pile of ash by now. The commanding officer was not very pleased by the stupid suggestion. His second officer dared not speak another word and simply turned his attention back to the control deck instead. Damn, those idiots could not even secure a woman. What a great loss. The commanding officer was still frustrated by his unfulfilled ambition to meet the lady. How great is the loss? A woman could be heard whispering in his ear. Her voice was as eerie to him. Panicked, the commanding officer turned around and saw a woman in white standing behind him. Her pitch-black hair was secured in place by an elegant jade hairpin, and her watery eyes glistened in the light like a myriad of stars shining in the darkest night. Her features, with her unprecedented aura and grace, would leave a profound impact on anyone. The lady he longed for was simply standing elegantly in the corner of his ship. Yet, the officer had no words for her, as he was stunned by her beauty and could only stare at her in awe. The Lord. Chapter 26-21. Revenge 4. Although the commanding officer had a chance to see Gu Zijia's face earlier through one of his screens, she had her eyes closed and half of her face hidden, so he could not see it very clearly. However, it was certainly enough for him to tell that she was a beautiful woman. Nevertheless, it was beyond his expectation that she would look 100 times more captivating in real life than through the screen. As soon as their eyes met, his heart thumped with excitement. He did not know what to say and could only look at her in admiration. Gu Shijio gave him a faint smile to toil with him. As expected, the man was absolutely captivated by her smile, but what came next was of a completely different tone. How dare you harm my people? I will kill you all for what you have done. As soon as she was done speaking, she used her teleportation skill and found herself in front of the control deck of the commanding officer's aircraft. Swiftly, her fingers pressed a series of buttons in a familiar sequence, and she took control of the warplane. The next thing that happened would surely drive the officer crazy. All the missiles available on the warplane were activated and targeted at different directions. He knew that she was going to blow up the neighboring aircrafts around his ship. Before he had any time to respond, the shooting began. Bam! 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 The destruction continued, with every consecutive detonation beaming with the sound of death. White lights were flashing in the distance as all the warplanes were hit and destroyed right in the air. Officer, what is going on? Officer, please come in. Officer, what happened? Officer. His men from the smaller warplanes all started panicking. They needed an answer from their commanding officer, but nothing was heard besides the sound of their vehicles blowing up. Stop it! Stop! Damn it! Stop everything that you are doing. The commanding officer was desperate. He could not care less about how she escaped from the smaller warplane from before. All he cared about was to get back control of his warship. He flipped his hand and turned the watch on his wrist into a silver, white gun. He pointed the gun at Gu Shijio and warned, "I will kill you if you don't stop." His second officer was charging toward Gu Shijio in an attempt to push her away from the controls. Gu Shiju laughed at them sarcastically before putting herself in a bubble of light, which soon turned into an invisible wizardry barrier. The second officer was not aware of the barrier and hurt himself right in the head. Gu Shijio took her new freedom to control the shooting again. Yet another warplane was shattered into ashes. She then scornfully teased the commanding officer. The bomb is great. One detonation is enough to shatter an entire plane. Try to guess which one I'm going to destroy next. The commanding officer was going crazy. All these troops were some of the best men he had ever trained, and yet he had to watch as this woman put an end to their lives. What was even more frustrating was that his warplane was the one that was the culprit. He had always been very proud of the performance of his warplane, but not right now. He only wished that he had never installed any weapons on it in the first place. That was the last straw for the commanding officer. He could no longer show any mercy to the woman, despite her unorthodox beauty. Frantically, he started shooting at her. However, the laser beam could not penetrate through the wizardry barrier she had in place. The commanding officer finally realized that the level of the Lord was vastly different from the rest of the people he had encountered. She was a deity, and her level of spiritual power was unfathomable. Driven by despair, he tried his best to aim all his weapons at the barrier to try to get revenge. He tried everything that he could, but it was completely useless. Helplessly, he watched as the woman continued to destroy the remaining warplanes he had in the sky. Chapter 26-22. The Return of the Lord. The citizens of Xingyao City watched with excitement as the entire scene unfolded before their eyes. From their point of view, it appeared as though the perverted commanding officer was using his massive warplane to shoot down every other plane in the air. To the people, these warplanes were their darkest nightmares that were filled with demons that gave them hell. Not only had the warplanes destroyed their homes, but they also killed their loved ones. The killing machines were indestructible. Furthermore, the commanding officer's warplane was the worst of all. Many women had been kidnapped on board and never returned. A woman once survived the tragedy as the officer abandoned her. Nonetheless, the poor woman was beaten up by the man. "Help," she repeated over and over again, even though she was no longer imprisoned. She did not survive for more than an hour before succumbing to her injuries. She died in agony. The people tried to examine her injuries and noticed that her body was covered with cuts and bruises. Her private part was badly ripped as well. It was clear that what she had been through was tragic. Therefore, if the soldiers were considered as demons, the commanding officer would be the worst of them all. The people of Xingyao City absolutely loathed him and could not wait for the day when he finally received the karma he deserved. It was no wonder that witnessing his entire fleet perish was such a joyous occasion for them. Nonetheless, they could not help but wonder what caused the feud. The massive warplane had always been surrounded by smaller ones. What changed? Even though the citizens were having the time of their life, the soldiers in charge of the smaller warcrafts were at loss of what to do. They reached out to their commanding officer requesting an explanation, but no one replied. In the control room of the large warcraft, the commanding officers felt completely hopeless. All the surrounding warplanes were no longer in sight. Perhaps his warplane was the only one left in the air. He was overwhelmed with loss and frustration, but there was no time to mourn, for the Lord had already turned her attention to him. The commanding officer was very tall and muscular, which was the complete opposite of Gu Zijia's slender and petite figure. However, her size was never an indication of her power. True enough, the commanding officer was completely intimidated by her intense glare. He staggered to his feet and took a few steps back. What are you going to do? I'm only acting on the instructions given to me. This is not my plan. Gu Shijio was playing with her newfound silver gun in her hand. On whose instructions? Who is your leader? She casually asked. Admiral Guan Yining. Where is he? He is at somewhere called Tianju Hall, trying to attack the place. Contact him. The officer's eyes glimmered with hope. He had been wanting to call the admiral, but dared not act recklessly under Gu Zijia's watch. He made his way to the control deck, but was stopped by Gu Shijio before he could press the call button. Wait. The officer was obviously shocked. Ah! He looked at her in confusion. With a tight smile, she said, "Get all of you men together in Tianhong Square. I have something for them to do first." Soon, the warplane was already heading to the square. The officer struggled with the decision. He knew how dangerous it would be for his men if he gathered them all together. The whole troop would be practically wiped out. Nonetheless, if he refused to do as told, he was not sure what the Lord would do with him. Chapter 26-23. The Return of the Lord 2. Will you let me live if I gather them all? That depends on how things unfold. Gu Shijio continued to play with the gun as she smilingly continued. I only know if you refuse to do as told, you will be dead sooner than you think. The officer was stunned. A brief moment later, he decided that it was better for others to die instead of having himself killed. Everyone, please gather yourself in Tianhong Square. He finally broadcasted the message. His voice echoed in every corner of Xingyao City through his vast broadcast system. It was loud and clear enough for everyone to hear him. The officer was a cruel and violent man. His ruthless figure was a scary sight to his men, so they would always obey his orders. However, the shooting in the air had somehow fragmented their faith in him. Nonetheless, after much thought, they still decided to go to Tianhong Square, but armed. As for the common people, they also heard the broadcast, though they were not the targeted audience. Driven by curiosity, some of them actually followed the soldiers to the square as well. Certainly, the people did not get too close to the square. On the other hand, the soldiers did not seem to care that they were being followed. The commanding officer's warplane finally stopped above the square, which was everything Gu Shijio wanted. "Contact the admiral in charge," Gu Shijio finally said. The officer was not sure of what she wanted to do, but was too afraid to question her intention. Swiftly, he started contacting the admiral. As these foreigners from the future had very advanced technology, it only took seconds for a man to appear on the screen. It was a 5D display, so the man looked very lifelike. It was as if he was truly standing in the cabin. The man was very tall, at least 6 feet and 2 inches tall. His body was firm and muscular, toned enough to carry his gray uniform in the finest way. On his shoulders, a line of golden badges glistened with bright lights, as if showing off his achievements. His sleeves were slightly folded, too, thus revealing his strong hands. On his wrist, he seemed to be wearing something that resembled a blue spiritual stone. He had a handsome face. Surprisingly, he had the face of an Asian man. All the foreign invaders that Gu Shijio had met thus far were Westerners through they had Asian-sounding names. Finally, she was able to see someone of the same descent. The color of his sharp eyes was black, and they swept across the cabin like an eagle with keen sight. "Meng Hui, who is this?" He finally left his eyes on Gu Shijio. The officer's name was actually Meng Hui. He stood at attention as he spoke. She seems to be the lord of this world. The man was caught by surprise and immediately became alerted. "The Lord? What is she doing in your vessel? What happened?" Meanwhile, Gu Shijio was waving at him. "Hi." The man was dumbfounded by her carefree nature. Gu Shijio continued smilingly. "You have been giving my people hell. Haven't you thought that one day you would get the karma you deserve?" The admiral definitely did not see this coming. "You claim to have come from Earth, so you should be aware that everything you do comes with a price. Meng Hui, kill her now," the man ordered. Meng Hui was on the verge of breaking down. If he could, he would have killed her already. Hence, his admiral's instructions would be felt unfulfilled. "Admiral, I cannot kill her. She is not afraid of any of our weapons." Meng Hui's face was pale as a sheet. As soon as he finished speaking, he took a few steps back like a timid rodent. The admiral remained unconvinced. "Bastard, if you don't kill her, I will kill you." Meng Hui was struggling to respond. "I dare not." Abruptly, he turned to her with 2 additional guns in his hands and started firing at Gu Shijio. He wanted to take advantage of the situation since she was not prepared. There was no wizardry barrier to keep her safe this time. So many flashes of laser beams could be seen launching at Gu Shijio all at once. Chapter 26-24. The Return of the Lord 3. All these laser beams, unlike the normal physical bullets, traveled at the speed of light. As soon as it was launched at a nearby target, it was already considered a hit. It was the fastest kind of weapon in the world, so the commanding officer reckoned the Lord must be dead. There was a nasty grin on Meng Hu's face once he put down his weapons. However, his satisfaction did not last too long as a gun was already pointed at him from the back. "What are you smiling at?" Gu Shijiu asked nonchalantly. Meng Hui was a loss for words. Anxiously, he tried to turn away, but his body was trembling uncontrollably. In the blink of an eye, he could feel something cold against his wrists. A sharp pain made him realize that he could no longer feel his hands. In fact, they were now on the floor. The guns that he had used to fire at Gu Shijiu were now in her possession, while blood continued to ooze out from both of his wounds. The pain was not describable. Intuitively, the commanding officer wanted to stop the wounds from bleeding, but he soon realized that he no longer had his hands to help him with anything. "Help me," he called out to the admiral in a desperate attempt. Meanwhile, the second officer was already shocked to the core. He wanted to help, but could not step forward for fear that his life would come to an abrupt end. Gu Shijiu pointed both of her guns at Meng Hui and his second officer. "Both of you, make your way to the cabin door." "What are you trying to do?" the admiral demanded in anger. He was clearly annoyed with Gu Shijiu. Gu Shijiu responded contemptuously. "You will soon find out. Boys, come with me." The admiral knew that something was not right. The Lord did not seem like someone who would show mercy to her enemies. He was sure that she would kill them. In fact, he was right. Gu Shijiu pushed the two men out of the vessel and made them beg their men to save them. His men were not stupid. Upon seeing how beaten their leaders were, they did not even try to step forward. Sternly, Gu Shijiu watched as the crowd contemplated their next move. Meng Hui was infuriated by the men's lack of loyalty. In good times, these men were the ones who often showered him with undivided attention. Now that he was in great danger, none of them stepped forward to help. He could not help but curse at the cowards. Unfortunately, he never had the chance to finish his sentence as a laser beam had punched a hole through his head. His second officer did not escape death either. He was killed before he could even retreat. "There is an intruder who has just killed our commanding officer. We must avenge him." The men refused to save the officer's life, but were brave enough to fire laser beams at the intruder after the death of their leader. Gu Shijiu kicked the second officer's body to shield her from the impending laser beams before teleporting to safety. In the next second, she found herself mid-air above the people shooting at her and started shooting at them with both her guns. It was a brutal slaughter. Her shooting was accurate and precise. Every shot took at least one life. She was too fast and ruthless that none of the soldiers could escape. They tried to shoot at her, but none of them managed to hit her. There were about 300 soldiers in the square, but none of them survived the massacre. Their bodies could be seen lying around in pools of blood. "My lord! Oh, it is the Lord! The Lord has returned! My lord!" Some could be heard sobbing in excitement as they called out for the Lord. "My lord, you are finally here. Our starry crescent land is safe." Hope had finally returned as the people watched the massacre from far behind. Never had they expected that Gu Shijiu would show up at the very last moment. Their hearts were filled with immense joy and delight. Tears of joy and relief started rolling down their eyes involuntarily. Chapter 26-25. The Return of the Lord 4. Once Gu Shijiu was done with the soldiers, the people of the Starry Crescent Land all ran forward and knelt before her. By that time, they were all weeping uncontrollably. From that simple act alone, Gu Shijiu could clearly tell the suffering that they must have gone through while she was away. The tragic sight pained her. Perhaps, if she had returned within the given time that she was supposed to, the place would not be doomed with this unfortunate incident. She took a deep breath before making an announcement. "Yes, I am back. I will ask those foreigners to compensate you for all the pain that you have gone through, and I will bring peace back to land." As soon as she was finished, she turned around and returned to the warplane. In just that brief moment, The news of the return of the Lord was widespread to every corner of Starry Crescent Land. The news had certainly come as a comfort to the brave souls who were still fighting valiantly to protect their land. They were tired and in despair after holding on for so long, but the news came as a powerful boost to their motivation. Their fighting spirit had returned once more. The Lord is back, and we shall be saved, they thought. The people of the Starry Crescent Land were hopeful again. The Admiral's display was still active in the cabin. He looked at her sternly in the eye and said, "How did you know how to use our weapons? Are you one of us?" Gu Shijio did not answer his question, but instead took full control over the warplane and slowly raised it into the air. "You are not from Earth, are you? You are only pretending to be one of them," she challenged. "Don't we look like humans from Earth?" He seemed to have been caught a little surprise. "You do look like one, but perhaps you were not born to be one. I can tell that you have spent some time on Earth before, but the way you behave is unlike us." "How can you know?" The Admiral was curious. Gu Shijio gave him a tight smile. At first, she thought that these people were humans from the future. It was only until she saw Meng Hu's pupils in his eyes when he was angered that she noticed an oddity. That instantly sparked her suspicion. From then on, she tried to infuriate him further and even scare him. Not only did Meng Hu's eyes squeezed into tiny slits in times of distress, but his second officer also had the same vertical pupils too. Although the slits only lasted for a split second, Gu Shijio was observant enough to notice the tiny changes. In order to find out more, she had to go after the soldiers in Xingyao City to see if the same changes applied to them when in fear. She noticed many of them, too, had vertical pupils in times of distress. Some of the weak ones had the color of their eyes change from emerald green to golden yellow in an instant. It became clear to her that they were not humans. They were some of the most advanced alien species, apparently. "Hey, why are you keeping quiet? I want to know how you found out about us." The Admiral was eager to know. Smilingly, he acted like he was not annoyed by the fact that their secret had just been uncovered. Gu Shijio finally turned around and looked him in the eye. The screen displaying the Admiral was almost within touching distance, but he was merely a visual representation. The man could probably be thousands of miles away, for all Gu Shijio knew. "How did you come here?" This was all that Gu Shijio cared about. "Have you heard about the concept of wormholes?" The Admiral started to get talkative. One can use a wormhole to travel from one dimension to another. In fact, one can even travel from one time frame to another. In other words, the whole universe was all but a huge playground for them to roam around freely with the help of the wormholes. They even had the ability to break through the confinement of time and travel from one era to another. Gu Shijio frowned a little as she recalled an article that she once read from a magazine talking about the possibility of Earth being visited by some advanced alien species, which was further reinforced by some undecipherable pieces of evidence that these creatures had left behind. It was not strange for the Starry Crescent Land to have some alien visitors, but she could somewhat tell that there was more behind what she had just heard. Chapter 2626. The woman was absolutely brilliant. The Starry Crescent Land had never been visited by the beings from outer space before. In fact, high up in the skies, there was a unique barrier shielding the land from any invasions by alien species. Her time-traveling experience from the future was a very rare case. Certainly, what happened with Long Fan and Long Sai was one of the rare exceptions as well. The thought of being able to use wormholes to travel through space and time was certainly troubling to Gu Shijio. With this revelation, she started thinking that all the so-called coincidences that she had experienced did not just happen without an apparent connection. There seemed to be someone behind the scenes, secretly controlling the sequence of every event like a puppeteer. The Firmament Stone once told her that a lord was not allowed to leave the Starry Crescent Land for more than 6 months. Otherwise, unfortunate events would unfold. This time around, the unfortunate event was the invasion of these aliens, which seemed to be some advanced species from another planet. Could the culprit behind all these plots be the man who was disguised as Zhu Duqing? While Gu Shijio was still deep in contemplation, The Admiral still had his eyes locked on her. It was clear to him that she was baffled by what he had just shared. With that thought in mind, he started laughing out loud. "What is your name?" he suddenly asked in a rather seductive tone. Gu Shijio simply ignored him and continued to maneuver the warplane. The Admiral was quite impressed by her skills. "You came as a surprise to me. When people talked about you, I honestly thought that you were just a con with glorified stories." "What an idiot," Gu Shijio replied sarcastically. "Is the Lord allowed to speak so maliciously?" He sounded surprised. "I have a handful of spiteful remarks for you. Are you interested to hear more?" "You are truly unbelievable." The Admiral sighed. "That is because your brain's capacity is too underdeveloped to see anything coming from me." The conversation had temporarily come to an abrupt end with that final nail in the coffin. The Admiral remained silent for a while before he uttered another word. "Where are you going?" he suddenly asked. "I'm looking for an open space so that we can have a proper fight." "How did you know I was coming for you?" The Admiral was mildly astonished again. Gu Shijio merely frowned. "The only point of this conversation is so that you can track my position, right?" The Admiral was impressed. The woman was absolutely brilliant. For a moment, he looked at Gu Shijio with a sense of admiration. "My lord, you should know that it is hard for you to change the established order of this place alone. We have claimed the entire Starry Crescent land as ours. You are not even native here, so why should you risk your life for these irrelevant people? If you wish to keep your power and status in this world, I have a suggestion for you. It is one which allows you to have the best of both worlds." "What is it?" "Be my woman, and I shall allow you to maintain control of this place." Smilingly, Gu Shijio took out a mirror and put it right in front of the Admiral. "Here, take a closer look at yourself in the mirror. Do you really think that you even worth my time?" The Admiral was completely speechless. Her rejection had shattered him more than her previous snide remarks. In fact, the Admiral had always been proud of his manly charm. Many women had willingly surrendered themselves to him. Having women fight each other to get his attention was just a normal day for him. This rejection was the first time he was given the cold shoulder. The well-traveled man had met countless women after years of wandering from planet to planet. Love affairs would certainly unfold wherever he stopped by, and he was able to charm the beautiful and the bright. He had captured the hearts of many different types of women. Some were shy and quiet. Some were bold and sexy. No matter their character, none of them had escaped his charm. Their hearts were completely surrendered to the man, and they would willingly do anything for him. Chapter 26-27. The lust of conquest. Gu Shijio was the most beautiful woman that he had ever encountered. He never knew the existence of an ethereal beauty until he met her. As an additional bonus, she was exceptionally bright. The lust of conquest burned like wildfire inside him. He wanted the woman badly. He needed to make her his 138th lover. "Gu Shijio. Remember, my name is Guan Yining. Remember it well." Guan Yining introduced himself in an overbearing tone. Gu Shijio was surprised by a sudden change of tone, but she was not really bothered by the man. The Admiral must have done a background check on her, so it was only natural that he knew her name. "Gu Shijio, you are an exceptional woman. However, your ability to control one warplane cannot bring you victory. Come and have a look at what is in front of you. You have been surrounded." With a white glove on his hand, he pointed his finger to the front of Gu Zijia's warplane. Gu Shijio looked out and saw the emergence of some warplanes in the clouds. She had indeed been surrounded from every direction. There was no way for her to escape using the warplane. All the surrounding warplanes were almost the same size as the one she was controlling, if not bigger, especially the one that was blocking her way from the front. It was as massive as a fort and glistened with silvery sparkles. There were 8 missiles at each side of the warplane, and one of the firearms happened to be in the shape of a triangle. Flashes of blue light indicated that the weapon was already aiming at her, presumably ready to fire. Obviously, the giant piece of machinery was the leading one. She could immediately assume that Guan Yining was in that particular warplane. "Do you see the triangular firearm? That is a BR atomic laser beam. Once fired, The monochromatic light will surround your entire warplane and kill only the living things on board. Nothing has managed to escape the deadly attack thus far. The added beauty of this weapon is that the warplane will not be harmed in any way. When you are gone, I shall manually control the warplane and bring it back to our base. So, now that you are aware of the consequences of your options, I believe you will be able to make a better decision. What do you plan to do? Guan Yining seemed to care about the woman more than he should. He was even offering her a lifeline when he should just terminate her. Meanwhile, Gu Shijio squinted her eyes at him. Although she was not sure about the functionality of a BR atomic laser beam, she believed that what he said about his plan was true. With a smile, she turned off the communication facility and made Guan Yining disappear so that she no longer had to see him in the cabin and listen to his endless blabbering. Also, she no longer wished to be monitored. Confidently, she pressed a few buttons on her own warplane, which triggered a few missiles to launch. Bam! 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 She started attacking. First things first, she fired at the massive warplane. It seemed to be prepared for the attack, as an alpha ray was released almost instantly to destroy all the incoming attacks. Nonetheless, the massive warplane had yet to attack in response. In stark contrast, the pilots of the surrounding warplanes could no longer keep their calm. All of them pointed their weapons at Gu Zijia's warplane and were ready to shoot, but no shots were fired. Guan Yining must have given them some instructions and stopped them from firing. Gu Shijio did not despair. If she cannot take out the big one, she could always attack the smaller ones and destroy as many as she could. Therefore, she changed course and pointed her weapons at another warplane and fired. Surprisingly, the warplane was also shielded by the same alpha ray. The defensive system was extraordinary and could protect the neighboring warplane from all the strikes. However, Gu Shijio could tell that the intensity of the alpha ray was not as strong as the one that protected the massive warplane. After a series of tireless assaults, Gu Shijio finally managed to hit the back of one of the smaller vessels and caused a fire. This action triggered the pilots of the other warplanes that wanted to attack Gu Shijio at once. All of them started firing at her vessel. Apparently, it became obvious to Gu Shijio that what she had learned about the warplane she operated was only very basic. Chapter 26-28. This was going to be a deadly fight. After all, Gu Shijio had only learned how to maneuver the warship. She did not really understand its other functions. For instance, she knew how to shoot, but did not know how to utilize the defensive protection of the warplane. There were more than 100 buttons on the console, so it was impossible for her to learn everything in such a short period. Thus, her ship also caught fire, and it was not a small fire like the one she inflicted on her opponent. Gu Shijio, if you don't surrender, I will launch the BR atomic light at your ship. You will not even have the time to regret your decision. I will count to 3. The sound emerged from a speaker inside Gu Zijia's ship that blared the voice of Guan Yining. Gu Zijia's response was to raise her hand and destroy the device. As it was too late for her to learn the controls now, she drove her own ship right into the lead warplane like a meteor. This was going to be a deadly fight. Guan Yining had never seen such a talented person that was not afraid of death. Although his warship was much bigger than the one that Gu Zijia piloted, if it was hit by the momentum of a meteor, it could also crash and fall. And even if it did not fall, the ship would surely be damaged. If Guan Yining's ship was to get damaged on this planet, it could not be repaired as they did not have the specific equipment needed. Therefore, Guan Yining had always been very good at protecting his own ships. His character was likened to a junior president who just bought his first luxury car. Even a few tiny little scratches would surely cause him to feel distressed. He was nervous and started to shoot at the incoming warplane. However, since he still wanted to catch her alive, he was aiming for the control panel of her ship, because if he could somehow deactivate it, there would be another set of controls that would be activated on his ship that would allow him to control the plane. If it were not the last resort, he would prefer not to destroy the incoming ship. After all, in this world, every ship was a powerful weapon. Firing at Gu Shijio with the hope of not having to destroy her ship, He watched as the warplane swayed violently, but suddenly came to an abrupt stop. He succeeded. Guan Yining raised his eyebrows slightly and immediately turned on the remote control system. He took control of the ship opposite his and then reactivated the 5D dialogue device. His figure reappeared on the ship at once, and he scanned the place to look for Gu Shijio, only to find that she had disappeared. Guan Yining was speechless. In a frenzy, he wanted to turn on the various monitors on her ship remotely, but alarms sounded on his own ship. Quickly, the man turned back and noticed that a white light illuminated behind him, showing Gu Zijia's image. The woman actually snuck onto his ship. Guan Yining's facial expression changed, and he quickly raised his hand and pressed on a button that activated a layer of protection over the console of the ship and covered him and his subordinates on the ship. Gu Shijio had cast a spell to make herself invisible, but she did not expect this ship to have such high-end equipment that could reveal her presence. The cover that Guan Yining had made did not crack at all even after she took 2 shots at it in quick succession. It must be tough to destroy. This time, she used her own palms to break the protective layer. The power of the great deity was not the same as the weapon that she had used before. Although it might not be able to destroy the world, it actually shook the entire ship and almost plunged it into the sea. The admiral was obviously dumbstruck. He did not expect human beings to be able to exert such a strong force with their bare hands. Meanwhile, his people desperately tried to control the ship to stabilize it in the air. Fortunately, his layer of protection was strong enough to keep them safe. Otherwise, her 2 palms could definitely turn them into meatballs. This power was more deadly than he ever expected. Chapter 26-29. This was too scary. Guan Yining was stunned by the immense power he witnessed Gu Shijio exert on the ship. Over the past year, he had toiled with many male masters in the Starry Crescent Land. Several of them were skillful enough to destroy one of his small warships. That act alone had already impressed him a lot. Nevertheless, no matter who the great admiral encountered, none of them were capable enough to enter into his ship. In fact, they could not even come close, as they were always suppressed by his array of weapons. Now, a small group of those people who dared to challenge him had hidden in Tianju Hall, and a wizardry barrier protected them. Fearing the power of the enemy, the admiral was certain that they would not choose to leave Tianju Hall anytime soon. Guan Yining had been attacking the wizardry barrier there in order to conquer the men who dared to challenge him. However, the barrier stood firm no matter what method he used. He had spent a reasonable amount of time analyzing the composition and structure of the wizardry barrier, but did not come up with any useful information as to how to take it down. In the end, he just chose to destroy his other targets in order to lure the people out of Tianju Hall. Besides, he believed that those people would come out one day. After all, the resources that they had available inside the barrier would be exhausted sooner or later. The size of the wizardry barrier that secured the place was hardly anything to brag about. Therefore, Guan Yining estimated that the resources inside would not be able to sustain the hundreds of people there for long. Whenever one of them attempted to leave, he would make sure a ship was prepared to enter and slaughter every last person inside. By his estimates, he expected a breach in the wizardry barrier within a month from when it was formed. Nonetheless, it had already been 3 months, and he had not seen anyone come out. The admiral grew anxious and wondered how long it would take him to tear down Tianju Hall and be the rightful ruler of the Starry Crescent Land with no one else left to challenge him. But just then, the Lord showed up. Gu Zijia's sudden emergence had changed Guan Yining's plans. He was under the impression that if he could catch their leader, these peasants would eventually surrender themselves. Unfortunately for the admiral, it was completely beyond his imagination that the Lord would be so powerful. Guan Yining had thought that he had possessed the most modern equipment in the Starry Crescent Land. Since he had a bigger gun, he believed he could control everything. He would simply attack anyone that did not submit to him and destroy them. Who would have guessed that he would have met his match along the way? Even though the admiral did not use to believe in immortal beings, he was certain that the person in front of him definitely fit the bill. Prior to this, Guan Yining used to believe that immortals were simply aliens with special abilities and that they had been wrongly exalted by fools who could not tell them apart. Watching Gu Shijiu hijack his ship and use her bare palms to cause more damage to the barrier that he had in place compared to his own modern weapons, he realized that it was time for him to believe that immortals really did exist. The revelation was pounded into his brain repeatedly as Gu Shijiu continued to destroy the unprotected areas inside of his warplane. Technically, the inside of the warplane was designed to be just as strong as the outside. No guns could destroy it. Hence, watching Gu Shijiu tear it apart with her own hands hit him to the core. This was too scary, in fact. Guan Yining did not care about being a gentleman anymore. He pressed a few buttons on the console, which released a toxin that could destroy all living things in the cabin. The toxic sprayed in the cabin like rain and covered almost every spot. He quickly looked to see if Gu Shijiu would be affected by the toxin, only to find that the woman in white had suddenly disappeared. Guan Yining and his subordinates remained silent, but deep in their thoughts, they wondered where the woman went. Although they were protected from the toxins, they did not dare to step out of the barrier until the toxic had evaporated entirely. From where they stood, Guan Yining attempted to check the monitors of the other cabins in his ship to see if Gu Shijiu had somehow repositioned herself. Instead of finding any oddities in his own ship, the admiral noticed that something was going on in the ship beside him. That warship was the closest to the main ship, and the pilot had been loyally guarding his leader's warplane in case of an external attack. At this moment, it suddenly swayed in the sky as though it was caught in a hurricane. Guan Yining suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart, and soon, his feeling turned into reality. The warplane was headed towards his vessel at lightning speed. The admiral's facial expression changed abruptly as he knew that there was no way for him to deactivate the controls on that ship. The only way to stop the attack was to fire at the incoming ship. Suddenly, a white light emerged from the admiral's ship and covered his loyal subordinate's warplane. In a matter of seconds, the light engulfed the plane along with anything that was inside of it. Chapter 2630. The Blue Fox family. Guan Yining was almost ready to vomit blood from the sight of what he had just done. His loyal subordinate had perished along with another warplane. He finally understood how Gu Shijiu was able to do everything that she did. She clearly must possess the ability to teleport at will. She must have made her way into the unprotected warplane and caught his fellow comrade off guard. Understanding her intentions, she naturally steered the warplane towards him. Fortunately for the admiral, his response was swift. If the man had not sacrificed his subordinates, perhaps that would have spelled the end for the parties on both ships. At this point, he could not help but wonder if he managed to take down the ghost-like lord with his perished companions. Nevertheless, this optimistic idea was quickly crushed by a hit of reality. Another neighboring warplane seemed to have lost control as well. The admiral did not need to guess where its next destination would be, since the ship was not very far away and it traveled hundreds of times faster than supersonic. It only took a blink of an eye for the ship to rush over and crash into the admiral's ship. There was no time for Guan Yining to take control of it. Therefore, he had to fire at it again and disintegrate his own warship into dust. The admiral was now even more distressed than before. This type of ship was certainly very costly, and he had taken out 2 of them in quick succession. Once a ship was destroyed, it meant that this firepower available here was also reduced. The only way to assemble more warplanes was for the admiral to return to his original planet and time frame to retrieve one. Should the current predicament continue, it was only a matter of time before Guan Yining became a commander with no subordinates. He figured that this lord must secretly be a devil or a demon who had ill intentions for the world, but now was not the time for him to get fixated over that. He needed to sort out this mess and prevent another one of his warplanes from going down. Quickly, Guan Yining made up his mind and ordered his subordinates to destroy the operating systems of their ships so that he could manually take over. He then remotely controlled the other warplanes in batches and promptly evacuated them. Despite being evacuated, the people on board the ships were noticeably still worried. Other than the main ship operated by the admiral, The other warplanes did not have the same protection and would be prone to takeover from the Lord. No one knew her current location, which made them tremble even more. The subordinates on the other ships immediately put on something similar to a night vision goggle, which is 1,000 times more accurate than the ordinary night vision devices available during the time period in the Starry Crescent Land. As long as Gu Shijio had heat radiating from her body, there was no way that she could hide even with her invisibility spell. Nonetheless, the Naturally Lord seemed to understand how these goggles functioned. Using her abilities, she could manually control her heat signature so that she would be able to move under the radar and remain untraceable. The men looked like fools with their eyewear. Even with their modern gear, they were not foolish enough to stray away from keeping vigilant. They made sure to keep an eye on their surroundings all the way until their ship reached the main station. Everyone was relieved at that point, as they felt that they had escaped death. It seemed that the devil was finally gone. Guan Yining was physically puking out blood once his ship came to a stop. 8 of his warplanes, along with nearly 50 of his loyal soldiers, had been taken down. They were all gone. When he got off the ship, he could barely keep himself together. However, that did not stop a soldier from running over to him. "General, the king of Blue Fox family wants to see you." Guan Yining was utterly miserable, and he had a feeling that things would be about to get worse. "What does he want?" "Tell him that I am exhausted." "I'm not going." The king said that he knows about the Lord. Guan Yining paused and finally turned around. "Where is he? Take me to him." He followed the soldier and strode forth angrily. Little did he know that Gu Shijio was tailing him all the way. Understanding ourselves and knowing our enemy can only increase our chances of winning a battle. She still knew too little about this group of people, and the best way to learn more was to explore their nest. After surveying the place briefly, an impulse hit her. She had been here before. This was the territory of the Blue Fox clan. Had these aliens conquered them? What about the king of Blue Fox family? What about the people? Had they been killed? Chapter 2631. The Blue Fox Family. 2. The Blue Fox family had always been an exceptional existence in the Starry Crescent Land. Due to their unique nature, they were generally very cautious of who they married and had a particular way of practicing. Every member of the clan was very skilled, but they would always be mysterious and keep a low profile. The Blue Fox clan was also known to have a mysterious wizardry barrier that could prevent any outsiders from breaking into their territory. Gu Shijio was invited by Lan Weihu to go in once, so she had seen the place before. The architecture on the inside was completely different from anything that she had seen before. Many buildings looked like pyramids that were equipped with a lightning rod at the top. When she first saw it, Gu Shijio wondered if the Blue Fox clan was somehow linked with the Egyptians. Nonetheless, that question was answered rather easily since all the members looked Chinese. Hence, she did not bother to pursue that idea any further. Knowing the heritage and mysterious power possessed by the clan, Gu Shijio thought that the Blue Fox community would be the last to collapse in the Starry Crescent Land. She never expected the place to become Guan Yining's residence and even host the other outsiders. Using her spiritual power, Gu Shijio levitated into the air to have a better look at her surroundings. She found that the pyramid-like structures of the Blue Fox family still existed, and each of them stood as orderly as before. It did not look like the place had been taken over through any sort of battle. Besides noticing the pyramids, she also saw Admiral Guan Yining walking hurriedly with a soldier next to him. She squinted her eyes slightly as she just could not believe how freely he traveled around the place. It would only take her a minute to shoot and kill Guan Yining on the spot. But would she want to shoot? She pinched her fingers together to prepare herself to cast the necessary spell in case she decided to go through with it. Just then, she heard Guan Yining curse. "Does Lan Yu really think he is the king of this place? Heck, I'm so tired, and he still expect me to go over." Gu Shijio was caught by surprise, and her body went stiff at the remark. She also loosened her fingers in her sleeves. Lan Yu, the current king of the Blue Fox family, was once the fiancé of Lan Weihu. He had competed with Yin Shun to get Lan Wei his heart, but after that, he gave up and returned to the Blue Fox clan. Gu Shijiao had previously befriended him. After several activities together, she had quite a good impression of him, as she felt that he was a person who was good at judging situations. She would not be too surprised to find out that this man was the culprit behind all this mess. But how did Lan Yu get involved with Guan Yining? And why did the admiral refer to him as the king? She bit her thin lips and followed the two men to learn more. The territory that belonged to the Blue Fox clan was vast. It was almost the equivalent of a small country, with a radius of about 5,000 or 6,000 square kilometers. Remembering the layout of the place, Gu Shijiao could tell at once that Guan Yining's residence was built in the most central position of the land that belonged to the Blue Fox clan. Gu Shijiao remembered that this place used to be a huge, empty square land. It was the place where the Blue Fox people came to worship. The square was about 100 kilometers wide, and the end could not be seen. The square tiles that paved the floor were covered with a kind of sapphire. At that time, the square was very eye-catching. But the main attraction was the jade blue foxes that surrounded the place of worship. The jade blue foxes were huge and came in different shapes and sizes. Each one was at least a few feet high. Although their postures were different, all their heads were raised up high, as if they were looking up at the sky to worship their creator. Whenever the Blue Fox people had their prayers, they worshipped these jade blue foxes. Lan Weihu used to explain to Gu Shijiao that this was the totem of the Blue Fox family, and asked her if they were beautiful. Gu Shijiao did not feel that they were very beautiful per se, but she did find them a bit strange. The fact that they were all looking to the sky was another mystery that she pondered as well. Of course, the carving and posture of these jade blue foxes were a lot more high-end than the typical stone statues. Since it was a totem of the family, Gu Shijiao merely observed it from a distance and did not pay too much attention to them. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.